Hey guys, tonight we step barefoot into a world where the sky has decided to become a giant salt shaker. And it's not sprinkling seasoning, it's sprinkling ash. You blink, and the tiny grey grains cling to your lashes like they've paid rent. Your tongue tastes the air and immediately regrets it, because it's bitter, dry, and weirdly metallic, like you just licked a coin you found in a puddle. Somewhere out beyond the tree line, the mountain isn't just sitting there looking dramatic, it's breathing. Slow, heavy, coughing breaths that roll across the land as a low rumble you feel in your ribs more than you hear in your ears. And yeah, I'm going to say it. You probably won't survive this, unless you get clever fast. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from while we wander through the dark together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not a caveman, not in the cartoon sense. No club, no tidy fur outfit, no guarantee your hair looks good from any angle. You're just you, hungry, tired, alert in that half-sleep way that doesn't feel like sleep at all. You've lived through hard seasons, sudden storms, and days when the hunt comes back empty. But this is different. This is the sky turning against you. Ash drifts down in slow sheets, like grey snow that refuses to melt. It muffles the world. Footsteps go quiet. Bird calls vanish. Even the wind sounds muted. As if it's trying not to make things worse. You keep your mouth closed because every breath feels like you're inhaling powder from a crushed stone. Your eyes water. You rub them once, mistake, and grit scratches like sandpaper. Lesson number 1 arrives immediately. Your body is a tool, and right now it's being slowly clogged by the landscape. You stand still and listen for the tribe, your people, your moving knot of warmth and squabbling and shared habits. You hear a cough, another. Then the low murmur of voices, tight, clipped, the tone humans use when fear is trying to sound like planning. Someone's baby fusses, the cry thin and reedy in the ash-heavy air, and the sound slices through you like a reminder. This isn't a story you tell later unless you make it through now. Your first survival move is embarrassingly simple. You stop staring at the mountain like it owes you an apology. You look at the ground instead. Ash settles thickest in low spots. It gathers in soft dunes behind rocks. It sticks to damp moss in dark patches. You notice which way it's blowing, and the direction matters more than any myth you've ever heard, because wind is a conveyor belt for danger. You don't have words like prevailing winds, but your skin and nose understand the concept perfectly. The older ones, those who've seen more winters than you, already have that tight-eyed look that says, we've been through something like this, or we've heard the story from someone who did. In prehistoric communities, knowledge isn't stored on paper. It's stored in the pause before a decision, in the way someone's hand points without shaking. The mainstream fact hiding in your moment of panic is this. Humans and their close relatives lived alongside active volcanoes for tens of thousands of years, and archaeological layers of volcanic ash, tephra, show up right on top of campsites, hearths, and stone tools, like nature stamped a date on the ground and said, here's what happened. People didn't always die. Sometimes they moved, sometimes they adapted, sometimes they returned. But right now, you're not thinking about archaeology. You're thinking about your lungs. Someone hands you a strip of hide, stiff, smoky, smelling like old fire. It's not a mask, not officially, but you press it over your mouth anyway. Another person wraps damp grass in a bundle and holds it to their face, breathing through it like a human filter. You try it. It helps. Not because it's magical, but because the wet fibres trap some of the ash before it turns your throat into a scratchy desert. You're basically reinventing the idea of a respirator with whatever the landscape will give you. Congratulations. You've just invented do something instead of do nothing, which is honestly the most important technology you have. The tribe gathers in a loose circle, shoulders hunched, hair already dusted grey. Everyone looks older. Ash has that effect. It gives you the instant ancient statue makeover. If you've ever wanted to see what you'd look like as a grumpy stone bust, today's your day. Joke 1. Congratulations. You're officially a limited edition collector's figurine now in volcanic grey. A low boom rolls in from the mountain, not sharp like thunder, but deep like the world's stomach growling. The ground doesn't crack, but it vibrates enough to make you feel suddenly small. You're aware of the unseen, the hot gas, the drifting particles, the possibility that the mountain is just warming up. You watch the animals, because you always watch the animals. The deer that used to graze near the stream are gone. Birds aren't circling, they've gone quiet or fled. Even insects seem confused. You remember a story, half laughed, half serious, about a time when the sky turned dark at midday. In that story, people followed the direction the animals ran. It sounded like superstition when you first heard it. Now it sounds like a map. The tribe argues softly. Do you shelter here or move now? The question is a blade with two edges. If you stay, you might be protected from wind and ash by familiar rocks and known paths. If you go, you risk walking into something worse, thicker ash, poisoned water, or the kind of fast, hot cloud that no legs can outrun. Historians still argue whether some prehistoric groups could recognise early volcanic warning signs reliably, or whether survival was mostly luck wrapped in good instincts. But you don't have the luxury of academic distance. You have the luxury of a few minutes and a very heavy sky. One of the older hunters, scar on the cheek, eyes like flint, kneels and scoops ash into a palm. He rubs it between finger and thumb, not just feeling texture, judging moisture. Dry ash blows and chokes. Wet ash sticks and weighs everything down. He smears a little on a flat stone and watches how it clumps. It's a simple test, but it's the kind that keeps you alive. Read the material, read the weather, read the mountain. A younger person points toward the river. Water, the gesture says. But the river is already changing colour, turning cloudy with suspended ash. The world's simplest resource becomes suspicious. You'd laugh at the idea of water betraying you on a normal day. Today you don't laugh. You just feel your mouth tighten. You move with the group toward higher ground. Not the highest. Not the ridge that would turn you into a silhouette against the grey sky. But a rise where the ash won't pool as thickly. You keep your head down and your eyes half closed, blinking slow. You learn to breathe shallow through the cloth. Your throat hurts, but you tell yourself it's temporary. Like when you chew something too dry and your mouth sulks. You pass your old campsite and it already looks abandoned. A hearth ringed with stones. A few scattered flakes of napped flint. A stick where someone hung strips of meat days ago. And then the ash falls on it all, softening edges, erasing footprints, turning your life into a layer. You feel a strange twist inside. Grief, yes, but also the practical part of you taking notes. If you come back, you'll find this place again by the shape of those stones. Ash hides things, but it also preserves them. It's like the world is putting your belongings under a blanket, except the blanket is trying to suffocate you. Here's a quirky tidbit that slips in like a whispered secret. Ash isn't only a killer, it can be useful. People in many times and places have used fine ash as a cleaning abrasive, scrubbing hides, scouring pots, even rubbing it on skin to cut grease. In a pinch. You can use a tiny amount as a crude drying agent or to help keep pests off stored foods. It's not glamorous. It's not Pinterest survival. It's more like, we're improvising because the planet is having feelings. Joke 2. Nature is basically doing a dramatic skincare routine right on your face, exfoliation you did not consent to. The tribe finds a shallow overhang, a rock lip that blocks some falling ash. Not a proper cave, but enough to make a difference. You huddle close. You rotate who stands at the edge to watch the sky. You do this partly because someone has to, and partly because watching gives your fear a job. Fear without a job becomes panic. Panic is how you die in stupid ways, like walking back into the ash because you forgot your favourite stone knife. And yes, you have a favourite. Don't pretend you don't. You notice the darkness deepening like evening arriving early. This is another mainstream fact woven into your moment. Big eruptions can loft ash and aerosols high into the atmosphere, dimming sunlight and cooling climate in the aftermath. You don't understand aerosols, but you understand cold. You understand shorter days. You understand hunger. Somewhere far in the future, people will argue about famous eruptions in prehistory, like the Campanian Ignimbrite eruption in Italy around 39,000 years ago, and whether it contributed to the decline of Neanderthals in Europe, or simply piled onto stresses already there. Historians still argue whether that volcanic event was a tipping point, or just a brutal chapter in a longer struggle. You, sitting under a rock lip with ash in your hair, we are the living version of that question. Is this the day the story breaks, or the day you bend and keep going? A child reaches for your hand, small fingers gritty. You squeeze gently, grounding yourself. You can't control the mountain. You can't negotiate with the sky, but you can control your next move, protect your breath, find cleaner water, keep the group together, and make decisions that aren't brave, just smart. You lean your head back against stone, close your eyes for a second and listen. The mountain rumbles again, but softer this time, as if it's pausing to gather itself. The ash keeps falling, steady, patient, like it has all night. And you realize, slowly, clearly, that survival here isn't one heroic sprint. It's 1,000 tiny choices made with a dry throat and a steady hand. Joke 3. Oh, quiet and sleepy. You always wanted a quiet night in, but you didn't mean the entire ecosystem taking a vow of silence. You pull the damp grass bundle back over your mouth. You shift closer to the warmth of bodies. You let the next breath be careful, and as the grey world settles onto everything you know, you begin the first real act of living through it. You start paying attention. You keep paying attention, because attention is the only thing that doesn't run out when the food does. The ash is still falling, but it's not falling the same way it did an hour ago. At first it was like soft grey snow. Now it comes in pulses, thicker then thinner, like the sky is breathing through a clogged nose. You tilt your head and feel the wind shift across your cheek. It's subtle, but you've spent your whole life learning subtle. Because subtle is where survival hides. You push up from the rock lip, joints stiff, and you do that careful half crouch that keeps your eyes level with the horizon. Nobody says recon, but that's what you're doing. The overhang helped, but it's not a solution. It's a pause button. And pause buttons don't work forever when the mountain is still deciding what kind of mood it's in. A low tremor ripples through the ground. So small you might have ignored it on a normal day, like a distant bison herd. But today, you notice. You feel it in the soles of your feet and in your teeth, like the world is humming one long, uncomfortable note. The older hunter with the scar does notice too. He looks up, not at the mountain's peak, but at the line of trees and the way their leaves twitch even when the wind calms. This is the part where you learn the mountain's moods, and it's not mystical, it's pattern recognition. The mountain doesn't warn you out of kindness. It leaks hints the way a sick body leaks symptoms. You just have to be the sort of creature who reads symptoms well. You see it first in the animals because they don't waste time pretending everything is fine. A line of deer emerges from the haze far downslope, moving fast, not sprinting, but doing that urgent, economical trot of creatures who have learned the difference between strange and dangerous. They don't stop to graze. They don't look around. They just go, sideways from the mountain, not toward the river, not toward the open plain. Their direction matters more than their speed. Someone beside you points, eyes wide. Another person mutters something, half prayer, half curse. You don't have the luxury of being dramatic, you just file it away. Animals are exiting laterally, that's a clue. Then there's the smell. It threads into your nostrils under the ash. Sharp, like rotten eggs, like wet stone struck too hard. Sulphur. You don't call it sulphur, but you know bad air. You've smelled it near certain hot springs or odd places where the ground feels warm in winter. The smell isn't constant, it comes in gusts. The air is changing in pockets, and that means gases are moving. Mainstream fact, slipping into your awareness. Volcanoes often release gases, water vapour, carbon dioxide, sulphur dioxide, before, during and after eruptions. Some of these gases irritate lungs and eyes. Some can pool in low areas and suffocate animals and people without flame or drama. The mountain's breath can kill even when you can't see it. You might not have a chemistry lesson, but your throat already feels like it took one. You step away from the overhang and walk with the scarred hunter and 2 others to a spot where you can see the slope better. The sky is dim, but not fully dark. It's that ugly twilight that makes it hard to judge distance. A column rises from the mountain's side, a dirty grey-brown plume that mushrooms upward and then shears off with the wind. It's not beautiful, it's not cinematic, it's simply big, and it changes the way your brain measures the risk. The scarred hunter does something that looks almost silly. He holds up a thin stick with a tuft of grass tied to the end, like a tiny flag. He watches it. He turns, He watches again. The grass flickers, then points steadily southeast. Wind direction. He's mapping what will hit you next. Joke 1. Because sleepy brains like small comforts. Congrats, you've just invented the world's most stressful weather app. Someone else kneels and puts an ear close to the ground, palm flat on the soil. You do it too, because copying smart behaviour is one of humanity's best traits. The earth feels alive, tiny vibrations, irregular, like a drum beat that can't pick a rhythm. Not constant, but frequent enough to keep your heart from settling. Historians still argue whether prehistoric people could connect these tremors to imminent danger in a consistent way, or whether they treated them as just another oddity, like thunder, like storms, like the occasional weird day when birds vanish. But you, right now, are connecting dots because you have to. You don't need to be correct in a scientific sense. You need to be correct in a survival sense. The debate inside your group sharpens. One person wants to run, now, immediately, before it gets worse. Another wants to stay under the rock lip and wait it out, because moving blind feels like walking into a predator's jaws. A third suggests going to the cave you used in winter farther north, where the entrance is narrow and the inside stays dry. And here's your tricky reality. Caves can be shelter, but they can also be traps if ash and gas pour in. Narrow entrances keep wind out, yes, but they also keep air from circulating. If the mountain's breath is heavy and low, it can slide into hollows like water. You imagine a cave filling with invisible death while you sleep. Your skin prickles. You make a decision in layers. First layer, get out of the lowest ground. Second layer, follow the wind, not into it. Third layer, don't aim for the prettiest view. Aim for air movement and escape routes. The scarred hunter gestures again, down and away toward a ridgeline that runs like a spine through the forest. It's not the tallest ridge. It's just high enough that ash won't settle as deep and open enough that gases won't pool. It also offers a path that keeps you angled sideways from the plume. He's reading the mountain without words. If the plume goes one way, you go the other. You gather everyone. It's not a neat line. It's a messy cluster of people with bundles, tools, kids, and the half-cooked plans you make when the sky is falling. Someone grabs the best stone blades. Someone else collects embers from the old hearth, cupped in a shell wrapped in damp bark, because fire is life and you don't want to start from scratch if the rain comes. The youngest are moved into the middle of the group like living treasure. You start walking. The forest feels unfamiliar under ash. Branches sag with weight. Leaves are coated, dull. The usual green smells, sap, damp soil, are muted by mineral dust. Every step puffs grey. You learn quickly to place your feet gently, not because you care about stealth, but because you don't want to kick up clouds that you then inhale. You breathe through your hide strip. It's damp now from your breath. That's good. Damp means filtration. As you move, you keep watching the signs. Birds, still absent. But then, suddenly, a few small ones burst from a thicket and fly hard, low, as if the sky itself is a ceiling they don't trust. You follow their trajectory with your eyes. They're cutting across the slope, not climbing, not dropping. Another clue. You also notice something stranger. The ash on the ground trembles when the tremors pass, making tiny ripples like wind on sand. It's subtle and mesmerizing. Quirky tidbit time. In some volcanic regions, people later talk about singing sands or ash that seems to whisper or hiss when it shifts. It's not supernatural. It's grains moving against each other, friction making faint sound. But in the half-dark, half-panicked world you're in, it feels like the earth is trying to talk. Joke 2. If the ground starts whispering, you don't need a translator. You need better life choices. You crest the ridge and the air changes. It's still dusty, but it moves. A faint breeze touches your face, and you realise how stale the air under the overhang had become. Movement is relief. You can taste the difference. Not clean, but less choking. From the ridge you can see farther. The mountain is partially hidden by the plume, but now you catch flashes. Faint orange deep in the cloud, like someone is lighting a fire behind a curtain. Lightning. Volcanic lightning can happen in ash clouds as particles collide and build electrical charge. Mainstream fact again, tucked into your fear. Eruptions can generate lightning within the plume, creating silent flickers and sudden cracks. You hear a distant snap, thin and sharp, not like thunder. Your skin tightens. Someone in your group gasps and makes a sign. Maybe a gesture toward a spirit, maybe just a habit. But you don't stop. You keep walking because you've decided your best prayer is distance. You count time differently now, not in hours, but in how many tremors since we moved, and how thick is the ash on my shoulders. The ash is still falling, but thinner on the ridge. It's being blown over rather than dumped. You feel like you've stepped out of a direct spray into the edge of it, like standing just outside a campfire's smoke. Still, the mountain keeps testing you. A louder boom rolls out and a shock of fear runs through the group like a ripple. A child starts to cry. An adult shushes too harshly, then softens because everyone's nerves are rubbed raw by dust and dread. You keep the pace steady, not too fast. Fast means exhaustion, mistakes, falls. Not too slow. Slow means lingering in danger. You pick the middle path, the most human path. Stubborn, practical, tired. Historians still argue whether ancient eruptions caused sudden mass migrations that reshaped entire regions, or whether people mostly moved in smaller pulses, families and bands relocating temporarily, then drifting back when conditions improved. Tonight, you are one of those pulses, a small moving pocket of life trying to stay ahead of a changing sky. And then you see the next sign that makes your stomach sink. The light is dimming further, not because night is coming, but because the plume is thickening. The sun, what you can see of it, is a dull smear behind grey, like a torch seen through animal hide. The day is being erased. You stop at a spot where the ridge narrows and drops into two valleys. One valley looks sheltered, too sheltered. The other is more open, windswept, with fewer trees. The scarred hunter points to the open one. So you understand why. Open means air movement, less ash accumulation, fewer hidden pools of heavy gas. It also means exposure, but exposure is sometimes safer than confinement when the danger is invisible. You go the open way. As you descend, the ash underfoot becomes gritty, mixed with small pumice stones that crunch like dry bread. Your feet ache. Your calves burn. You're moving through a landscape that is becoming unfamiliar in real time. But you keep reading it. The way the ash drifts, the way the wind tugs, the way the animals flee sideways, the way the ground trembles like a nervous animal. And somewhere inside you, beneath the fear and the cough and the gritty eyelids, a calm thread forms. You can't predict the mountain perfectly, but you can respond to it intelligently. You can watch. You can adjust. You can choose the next safe patch of air. Joke 3, whispered to yourself as you trudge. If you survive, you're absolutely leaving a 1-star review for this mountain. Atmosphere, too spicy. Lighting, terrible. Would not recommend. You keep moving. Ridge behind you now. The wind in your face. The ash thinning for the first time since the sky began to fall. And you realise the mountain's moods aren't random. They're patterns. And if you can learn the pattern fast enough, you just might get to keep breathing long enough to see what tomorrow looks like, assuming tomorrow still exists. Tomorrow might exist, sure, but it's going to smell like dust and bad decisions for a while. You walk until your legs feel like they've been filled with wet sand, and then you walk a little more because stopping is its own kind of risk. The open valley you chose keeps the air moving, but it also keeps the ash swirling, never letting it settle politely. It's like living inside a shaken blanket. Your throat is the first to complain, then your eyes, then your skin. Every exposed bit of you starts to feel dry and tight, as if the world is trying to turn you into jerky. You swallow and it scratches. You cough and it scratches more. Breathing becomes something you do on purpose, not automatically, like you've been promoted to manual mode for your own lungs. And honestly, you didn't ask for that job, so you get practical. You do the thing humans do best. You start making barriers between your soft parts and the harsh world. The hide strip over your mouth is damp now, and you notice it's working better than when it was dry. That's not magic, that's physics. Wet fibres trap particles. You pinch the top against your nose with your fingers so the air is forced through the cloth instead of sneaking around it. It's clumsy, but it helps. Someone else wraps a woven reed mat around their face, and you can tell they're proud of it, until it slips and they inhale a lungful of grit and immediately look less proud. Mainstream facts slipping in quietly. Volcanic ash isn't soft like fireplace ash. It's tiny shards of rock and glass, jagged and abrasive. That's why it irritates eyes and lungs so badly, and why it can scratch surfaces and wear down teeth over time. You don't have a microscope, but your gums and eyelids are giving you a detailed report. You stop for a moment under a scraggly tree where the branches catch some of the falling dust. The leaves are grey, The bark is grey, your thoughts are grey. You pull the hide away and spit. The spit is grey too. Cute. The world has entered its monochrome era. Someone hands you a lump of damp clay scooped from a stream bank earlier, before the water got too nasty. They smear it on their cheeks and under their eyes, not like war paint, more like protective mud. You hesitate, then do it too. The clay cools your skin and forms a thin film that keeps the ash from sticking as tightly. It's not a force field, but it's something. Joke 1. Congratulations. You've discovered skincare. Volcanic Apocalypse Edition. Exfoliate, moisturize, scream internally. The group keeps moving, but you build little routines as you go. Every so often you check on the kids, making sure their faces are covered, their breathing not too frantic. You remind them to keep their mouths shut as much as possible, which is, ironically, the hardest instruction you can give a child. You coax them with a promise of water later. You don't tell them you're not sure how soon later will be. When someone coughs too hard, deep, rattling, you slow the pace. You don't want to push a sick person into collapse. This is one of the most human survival adaptations. You don't leave people behind as quickly as other animals might because a group is a living machine. Lose parts, the machine fails. Also, empathy. But let's not get too sentimental. You're still breathing through dusty hide. You experiment with different breathing patterns. Short inhale through cloth, longer exhale. You keep your head slightly down so ash doesn't fall straight into your eyes. You blink slowly, not fast. Fast blinking drags grit across the surface. When your eyes sting, you resist rubbing. Rubbing feels good for half a second, and then you feel like you've sanded your eyeball. You learn the hard way once, and after that you become very disciplined. A woman in your group, older, sharp-eyed, collects water in a small hollowed gourd and adds a handful of crushed leaves. She swirls it, then uses it to rinse her eyes, tipping her head back and letting it dribble across her lids. You watch, then copy. It helps, but you're careful. Too much dirty water in your eye is its own problem. Still, in this world, you're always choosing between imperfect options. Quirky tidbit time. In some cultures much later, people use certain plant saps and herbal infusions as eye rinses or to soothe irritation, sometimes effective, sometimes questionable. You don't know which category this leaf belongs to. Sazi, you just know it feels less awful than ash. Historians still argue whether the earliest humans deliberately developed disaster kits in the way we imagine, bundles prepared for emergencies, or whether what looks like planning is simply the natural result of always living on the edge of scarcity. But as you watch people grab embers, wrap tools and save skin coverings for faces, you realise you do have a disaster kit. It's just called everything you own that isn't nailed to the earth. The air suddenly thickens. It's not just ash now, it's a heavier sour cloud that makes your stomach flip. The rotten egg smell intensifies. The scarred hunter raises his hand and everyone slows. He points to a low depression ahead, where the ground dips and the trees bunch close together. The air there looks wrong. Not visible exactly. But you see how the ash falls strangely, sinking and lingering instead of drifting. You realise what you're seeing, still air, a pocket. Carbon dioxide is heavier than air. So are some volcanic gases. They can pool in low areas, especially at night or in sheltered dips, like invisible water filling a bowl. Mainstream fact again, because this one matters. There are places near volcanoes where animals have been found dead in depressions, because CO2 collected there. No flames, no dramatic lava. Just quiet suffocation. You steer the group around it, climbing slightly, choosing wind. You don't even need to explain. The adults feel the wrongness in their chest. The kids just follow. Your skin starts to itch. Ash works its way into folds, underarms, behind knees, the crease of your neck. It's like wearing a sweater made of powdered regret. You stop briefly and shake out your hair, and a grey cloud puffs off you. Someone laughs, a short bark of sound, and it's the first real laughter in hours. It's not happiness, it's relief finding a crack to leak through. You remember the ash can be abrasive, and you adjust how you carry things. You wrap your best stone blade in a piece of hide so the grit doesn't dull its edge as you walk. You keep your teeth clenched because you can feel ash between them. You swallow less. You become a creature of small efficiencies. Then comes the big problem you've been avoiding, breathing for the long haul. You can't just tough it out indefinitely. You need cleaner air pockets. You need breaks. And if the ash keeps falling for days, you need something better than a damp hide strip, so you improvise. You find a piece of woven plant fibre, maybe from a basket, maybe from a sleeping mat, and you fold it several times, making layers. You dampen it with what little cleanish water you can spare, and you tie it around your face with a cord. It's bulky, uncomfortable, and makes you look like a very angry, very dusty moth. But it's more surface area, more filtration. You can breathe a little deeper without coughing instantly. Joke too, because you deserve it. You're basically inventing high fashion. This season's must-have, layered reeds, ash-tone palette, pairs well with existential dread. You also think about the eyes. One person has a trick. They smear a thin line of animal fat under the eyes and across the cheekbones. It sounds gross, but the fat catches ash and keeps it from drying the skin so badly. You try it. It helps. And it gives you that shiny look of someone who lost a fight with a cooking pot. But it's functional, and in survival, functional is beautiful. The group moves toward a stand of larger trees where the canopy is thicker. Under it, ash fall is reduced. You can hear it ticking on leaves above, a soft, constant patter. You feel a strange comfort in the sound. It's predictable, and predictable is calming when everything else is chaos. You breathe slower. Your heart rate dips. But then, as if the mountain heard you relaxing and took it personally, a new rumble rises. Deeper, longer. The ground trembles harder. A few stones roll down a nearby slope, clicking. Someone whispers a name for the mountain, a spirit name, not because it helps physically, but because naming something makes it feel slightly less infinite. Historians still argue whether spiritual interpretations of volcanoes in early societies functioned as psychological coping mechanisms, social cohesion tools, or genuine belief systems shaped by lived experience. You don't care what category it falls into, you just know that fear shared becomes lighter. So you let the whispering happen. You pause in the tree stand and you check everyone like a shepherd counts sheep. Faces are smeared with clay and fat. Eyes are red, throats are raw, but you're still together, still moving. A kid tugs your hand and points at your face covering, eyes curious. You lean down and adjust theirs, tucking the cloth tighter. You show them how to breathe through the damp part, how to exhale slowly so it stays wet longer. You realise you're teaching survival like it's a bedtime routine. Breathe in, breathe out. Then don't rub your eyes, stay close. The ash keeps coming, but it feels slightly finer now, less gritty, more powdery. That might mean the plume has changed, or the wind has shifted, or the mountain is cycling through phases. You don't know, but you notice. You always notice. You move on again, and as you do, you discover a small gift. A thin drizzle begins, barely rain, more like mist. It beads on leaves, dampens the air and weighs the ash down so it falls faster and swirls less. For your lungs, it's a blessing. For the world, it might be a curse. Wet ash can turn heavy and sticky, collapsing roofs, snapping branches, turning paths into sludge. But right now, as it moistens your face covering and cools your throat, you take the win. Joke 3, soft and tired. When the apocalypse hands you a misty little spa moment, you don't ask questions. There you just breathe, and you do. Carefully. Through layered fibres and damp hide. With clay on your cheeks and fat under your eyes. You keep your head down and your pace steady, learning that surviving an eruption isn't just about outrunning lava, it's about outsmarting the air itself. You take the win, misty air, slightly calmer lungs, right up until you remember that breathing is only half the problem. The other half is water, and water is getting weird. At first you tell yourself you'll handle it later. You always do. Hunger and thirst are like needy little siblings. You keep promising them attention while you deal with the bigger fire. But then your tongue sticks slightly to the roof of your mouth and you swallow and feel nothing. No relief, just friction. The kids start licking their lips. Someone's voice gets hoarse when they speak. That's when you admit it. The tribe can't keep walking on dry throats and wishful thinking. You follow the line of the valley toward the place where you think there's a stream. Think is doing a lot of work now, because landmarks are blurred by ash, and the smell of wet stone is drowned by the smell of the mountain's breath. Still, you know the land like you know your own hands. You can feel the slope under your feet. You can sense where water would cut. When you finally hear it, a faint, irregular trickle, it's like hearing a friend call your name in a crowded room. You hurry, then stop yourself, because hurrying makes you careless. You approach with the caution you'd normally reserve for a predator den. The stream is there, but it's wrong. The surface is cloudy. Little rafts of ash drift in slow swirls like grey scum. When you scoop a handful, the water feels gritty, and it smells faintly sour. You let it run through your fingers and watch how it coats your skin. Your instinct screams, "Don't drink this." Mainstream fact, and it's unglamorous. Volcanic ash can contaminate water sources. It increases turbidity, can carry fluoride and other compounds depending on the eruption, and it can irritate the digestive system even without being poison, in the dramatic sense. Your body doesn't care about the nuance, it cares about, will this make me vomit and dehydrate faster? That's the calculation. People gather at the bank, eyes hungry. One person dips their mouth directly to the stream, desperation beating caution, and takes a sip. They immediately cough and spit, face twisting. The grit hits their throat like sand. They wipe their lips and look embarrassed, as if the stream personally insulted them. Joke 1, because your brain needs a small laugh. The stream just served them a tall glass of nope with extra pulp. You need cleaner water, or at least less terrible water, so you start making choices like an engineer, even though you've never seen a wheel. You look for where the water enters the stream, higher up where it might be less fouled. You look for small side trickles coming out of the ground, springs that haven't had time to load up on ash. You look for pools under overhanging roots where ash fall is slightly reduced. You become obsessed with the idea of protected water, the way you became obsessed with moving air. A child points at a broad leaf cupped naturally into a bowl, holding droplets of rain mist. You tilt it and the water slides into your palm. You taste it. It's clean. Tiny amount, but clean. Your chest loosens with relief. Rain is a gift, but not enough on its own. Someone suggests collecting water from the sky, stretching hides and mats to catch drizzle, funneling it into gourds or shells. You do it. It's a slow process, but it works. You tie a hide between two branches and let the mist gather and run. It's the earliest kind of rainwater harvesting, and you feel absurdly proud of it, like you just invented a luxury beverage. But you still need the stream because you can't live on droplets. You watch the older woman, the one who mixed leaves for eye rinses, kneel by the water with calm patience. She doesn't drink. She studies. She dips a cup, lets it sit. The ash settles slowly to the bottom, leaving a clearer layer on top. Not perfectly clear, but better. She pours that top layer into another vessel, leaving the sludge behind. It's a simple settling technique, gravity doing your work for free. Mainstream fact meets lived experience. Letting sediment settle is one of the oldest water treatment methods humans have used. It doesn't remove everything, but it reduces particles and makes the water easier on the throat and stomach. You copy immediately. You become a whole crew of amateur water clarifiers. Then someone goes further. They take a woven basket, line it with moss, then pour the partly settled water through it. The moss traps more grit. You taste the result. Still not great, but drinkable, without feeling like you're chewing. You sip slowly, letting your body accept it. Your throat sighs. Quirky tidbit time. There's a strange, almost fringe idea that in some early societies people might have used ash itself as part of purification, adding small amounts of wood ash to water to change pH, or using charcoal from fires as a crude filter. The effectiveness varies wildly, and sometimes it's more ritual than science. But here you are staring at a world full of ash, thinking, could the problem also be part of the solution? You can't drink ash water, but you can use charcoal if you have it. You do. You've carried embers, and where there are embers, there is charcoal. You crush cooled charcoal into small pieces, not powder, pieces, and you layer it in a pouch of woven fibre along with sand and moss. It's not a lab-grade filter, but it's a clever hack. You pour the settled water through. The water comes out darker at first, then clearer. You taste it. Less sour. Less gritty. Your eyes widen. You don't say, activated carbon, but you've stumbled onto the principle. Porous carbon can adsorb some impurities and improve taste. Historians still argue whether prehistoric groups intentionally used charcoal filtration in a systematic way, or whether such techniques appeared much later with more settled life. But the debate doesn't matter to you tonight. You found a method that makes the water less hostile, and that's enough. The tribe organises around the stream like it's a tiny factory. One person collects drizzle in hides, 2 people set bowls to settle, another lines baskets with moss, someone guards the kids from tumbling into the bank. The scarred hunter watches the surroundings because even during a volcanic mess, predators don't stop being predators. A wolf will still wolf. A bear will still bear. Nature doesn't pause its other problems just because the sky's dramatic. You drink carefully, but you don't overdo it. Your stomach is already stressed. Your lungs are stressed. Everything is stressed. You don't want to shock your body with too much at once. You give small sips to the kids first. They make faces. One spits and glares at you like you invented gritty water. You shrug in your soul. Parenting in the Stone Age is just customer service with fewer refunds. Joke 2. You can't wait for the comment section later. Why didn't you just buy bottled water? Yes. Thank you, time traveller. Let me just pop down to the local convenience cave. The mist turns into a steadier drizzle. The stream swells slightly, which is good because fresh water dilutes the ash load, but it also stirs up more sediment. You adjust. You take water from the quieter edges, not the main flow. You scoop gently, not stirring the bottom. You learn to be delicate with the stream, like it's a skittish animal. Then, as you're working, you notice something unsettling. A few small dead insects floating near the edge. Not many, but enough to make you watch. You scan the air above the stream. Is the water killing them, or did they simply get knocked down by ash and rain? You don't know, but you take it as a reminder. Water is not just water now. It's an experiment you're running on your own body. You keep the group from camping too close to the stream bed. Low spots are where heavier gases can pool, especially if the wind dies at night. You choose a slightly raised bank. You set up on ground that slopes gently so if there's a sudden muddy surge, it doesn't swallow you in sleep. Volcanic ash mixed with rain can create lahars, fast-moving mud flows, downstream of eruptions. You don't have the word lahar, but you've seen flash floods. You know water can come roaring without warning. Add ash, and it becomes thicker, heavier, meaner. Mainstream fact again, because this one is a classic killer. Volcanic mud flows can travel far from the volcano, following river valleys and burying everything in their path. People far from the crater can die from water turned to cement. You glance upstream and decide you don't want to be in the river's mouth if it decides to bite. So you set camp lightly, ready to move. You keep your tools packed. You keep the embers safe. You assign someone to watch the stream's level and listen for the sound change that signals a surge. The tribe settles into a tense rhythm: drink, filter, rest, listen, repeat. As night thickens, the ashfall slows a little, and the drizzle continues. The sky is still dim, but not entirely black. It's like you're living under a lid. The mountain rumbles in the distance, quieter now, like a sleeping beast that twitches in dreams. You sit near the filtered water, watching it drip through moss and charcoal into a gourd. Each drop is a small victory. You pass the gourd around. People sip. Someone sighs. Someone's shoulders drop for the first time in hours. Historians still argue whether disasters like this pushed humans toward more complex cooperation. Division of labour, shared planning, resource pooling, or whether cooperation was already the baseline and disasters simply revealed it. Tonight, cooperation is not a theory. It's the thing keeping you from becoming a cautionary layer of bones under ash. Joke 3, whispered as you watch the slow drip. You've always wanted to be part of a community project. You just didn't expect the project to be DIY, don't die. You lean back, feeling the first hint of rest. Your throat is still raw, your eyes still sting, your skin still itches, but there's water in your belly, and water buys time. And time is the currency you're spending to learn the mountain, to outlast the ash, to stay human in a world that suddenly wants to turn you into stone. Water buys time, and time buys you the next problem, because your stomach doesn't care that the sky is full of volcanic drama. It still wants calories, preferably not in the form of gritty stream sludge and desperation. You wake from a shallow, twitchy half-sleep, the kind where your body rests but your mind keeps one eye open. Your face covering is damp and cold. Ash has settled lightly overnight, frosting the world again. The drizzle eased at some point, leaving everything slick and grey. You sit up and immediately feel hunger as a dull ache, like a quiet complaint in the background of your chest. Food after the fire is never about heroics, it's about pivoting fast. The first thing you notice is how wrong the landscape feels. The usual signs of life, birds, insects, the little rustling movements, are muted. The ash has smothered scent trails. It's harder to track, it's harder to hunt. The prey animals you rely on are either fleeing, hiding, or already moved out of this valley. The deer line you saw earlier, they didn't run for fun. They ran because their world turned hostile too. Mainstream fact, and dressed in your hunger. Volcanic eruptions can cause immediate ecosystem disruption, ash covering vegetation, reducing forage, contaminating water, and pushing animals to migrate. That means hunting gets unreliable fast. So you do what humans have always done when hunting fails. You diversify. You start with the low-effort wins. You send a couple of people to check traps you set long ago along the valley edges, snare lines, deadfall stones, the kind of quiet hunting that works even when your lungs are tired. Most are empty. One has a rabbit or something rabbit-like coated in ash. The sight makes your stomach leap and your brain hesitate at the same time. Food, yes. But is it safe? You brush the ash off as best you can. You skin carefully because ash in fur is like sand in your mouth. You rinse the meat with filtered water, sparingly, because water is precious. Then you set it aside. You don't eat it raw, not now, not in this dusty world. You'll cook, even if smoke is risky. Then you look at plants. Normally you'd forage with confidence. Roots, berries, greens, nuts. Now everything is dusted grey. Leaves look like they've been rolled in flour. Berries are coated. Some plants are bent under ash weight. You pick a handful of berries, rub them between your fingers, and the ash smears into purple paste. You sniff. The berry smell is still there underneath. You taste one cautiously. It's gritty, but it tastes like food, not poison. You know the difference between grit and bad. Grit is unpleasant. Bad is the bitter, numbing taste that makes your tongue scream. Still, you're careful. You choose foods you know well. Nothing new, nothing experimental. Historians still argue whether disasters drove ancient people to experiment with unfamiliar foods out of necessity, or whether taboo and caution kept them conservative even when starving. You, today, lean conservative. You'd rather eat less than gamble your guts. You also prioritise things you can peel, nuts in shells, tubers you can dig and wash, bulbs you can strip. Nature's packaging is suddenly your best friend. You find a patch of tubers in softer soil near the edge of the valley where ash is thinner. Digging is messy. Ash puffs with each scrape of your digging stick. You keep your face turned aside, breathing through damp cloth. You pry out the tubers, grey on the outside, pale when you scrape them clean. That pale interior feels like hope, honestly. Like the world is saying, not everything is ruined, just most of the vibe. Quirky tidbit time. There's a fringe but real idea that volcanic ash, while disastrous short-term, can make soils more fertile long-term by adding minerals. Later farming societies often benefited from volcanic soils. Rich, productive land around volcanoes is a known pattern. You don't know fertility as a soil chemistry concept, but you might notice later that plants rebound fast in the ash layer. Tonight, though, you're not celebrating future agriculture. You're just trying to eat something that doesn't crunch like glass. Back at the makeshift camp, the tribe starts building a food plan. Not written, not formal, just shared understanding. Hunting is uncertain, so plant foods and stored foods matter more. If anyone has dried meat from before the ashfall, it's suddenly precious. If anyone has nuts cached, it's time to dig them up. Someone remembers a stash, buried in a hide pouch under a marker stone near the old trail. 2 people go with the scarred hunter because leaving camp is risky. They come back with a bundle of dried meat strips, tough as old leather. Normally you'd complain. Today it's a banquet. Joke 1. You realise you'd sell your soul for something crunchy that isn't ash, which is a weird culinary milestone. Now comes the cooking problem. Fire gives warmth and safety and cooked food. Fire also gives smoke. Smoke in an ash-filled world is like adding extra chaos to your lungs. You need heat without a giant "here we are" signal, and without filling your own faces with more irritants. So you make a low fire, not a tall flame, not a roaring blaze. You dig a shallow pit, line it with stones, and build the smallest, hottest bed of coals you can. You use dry wood if you have it, but the drizzle has dampened everything. You choose thicker pieces from under logs, places the ash and moisture didn't reach as much. You blow gently, keeping your face away. You keep the fire fed but controlled. The goal is coals, not flame. Mainstream fact slides in again. Hearths and controlled fire use are ancient, tens of thousands of years old, and people often used pits and windbreaks to manage heat and smoke. You're not inventing fire, you're refining it under pressure. You roast tubers in the coals, you hold meat on sticks over the heat, turning it slow. You don't want flare-ups. You don't want heavy smoke. You cook quietly, like you're trying not to wake the mountain. The smell of food spreads anyway, warm, fatty, real. It pulls the group in. People's eyes soften. Kids stop whining for a minute. You're hypnotized by the idea of eating. You hand out small portions first. You don't gorge. You ration. You chew slowly to keep ash out. You drink a sip of filtered water after each bite to wash grit away. It's not pleasant, but it's nutrition. Then you notice something. Your teeth feel wrong. Grit between them, yes, but more than that. Your molars feel like they've been grinding sand. Volcanic ash is abrasive. Over time, it can wear down teeth, especially if it coats food. You don't have toothbrushes, you do have sticks. Someone chews on a thin twig, fibrous, and uses it to rub their teeth. You do the same. A crude tooth cleaning tool, but it helps. Another person rubs teeth with a bit of charcoal. Again, not pretty, but effective at scraping away grime. Joke 2. Congratulations. You're now doing dental care with campfire leftovers. Your future dentist is both impressed and horrified. You also think about food storage in this new world. Ash will coat everything. It will get into caches. It will make dried meat taste like dirt unless you protect it. So you wrap food tightly in hides, tuck it into containers, and keep it off the ground. You start hanging things again under branches, using height as defense from both ash accumulation and scavengers. But food isn't just calories, it's morale. And morale is a survival resource. Someone tells a story while chewing, an old tale about a time the sky turned dark and the sun disappeared. In the story, a trickster figure tried to eat the sun like it was a fruit and got burned. People chuckle weakly. The laughter isn't loud, but it's real. Historians still argue whether storytelling in crisis primarily served to explain the unexplainable, or whether it functioned as social glue to reduce panic and coordinate groups. Again, you don't care which academic box it fits in. You care that the kids stop shaking when they listen. After eating, you feel energy return in a small, precious trickle. Your muscles loosen, your mind sharpens, and that's when the next choice appears. Do you stay here and keep foraging locally, or do you keep moving to find less affected land? You take stock. The ashfall is lighter now, but the sky is still dim. The mountain rumbles occasionally, like it's clearing its throat. The stream is still cloudy but manageable with filtering. Food, though, will get harder each day if animals keep leaving and plants remain coated. So you start planning for a mixed strategy. You don't abandon the area immediately, but you don't settle in like this is home. You treat this camp as a staging point, a place to rest, filter water, cook, and then send scouting parties outward to look for clearer air and greener ground. A small group goes out along the ridgeline again, faces covered, moving light. They return with news. Farther downwind, the ash layer is thicker. Upwind, it's clearer, but the air smells harsher. Sideways, always sideways, there may be a pocket of land where the ashfall is less. The scarred hunter nods. It matches what the deer did. Lateral escape. Not straight away, not straight toward. Joke 3. The lesson of the day is basically don't go where the smoke is, which sounds obvious until you realise you've spent hours arguing about it like a committee. You chew the last of your tuber, feel the warmth settle in your belly, and you look at your hands, grey-stained, cracked, steady. You realise you're not surviving by one grand act. You're surviving by constantly adjusting your menu, your movement, your methods. Water filtering becomes routine, face coverings become routine, now food adaptation becomes routine, and as you pack up the remaining dried meat and tuck the tubers into a hide bundle, you feel something close to gratitude. Not for the eruption, obviously, but for the simple fact that your people can change. The mountain can throw ash at you, but it can't stop you from learning. Learning keeps you alive, but shelter keeps you from spending that life shivering, coughing, and scraping grit out of places grit should never be. After food, after water, after breath. The next question slides in like a cold hand. Where do you put your body so it doesn't get punished all night? You look around at the camp you threw together near the stream. Raised bank, quick wind, decent access to water. It worked for a night. But now, with the drizzle easing and ash still drifting, you can feel how temporary it is. Everything you own has a grey film again. Your sleeping hides are damp. Your hair is basically an ash storage system. And your lungs? Your lungs would like to submit a formal complaint, so you start hunting for shelter the way you hunt for food, with attention, with caution, with a little bit of stubborn creativity. The obvious option is a cave. Caves are classic. Caves are warmish. Caves have ceilings that don't care about ashfall, and yes, the winter cave you used before is still in your mind like a comforting memory. Dark, familiar, tucked into stone. But you also remember the invisible gas problem. Heavy gases pool. Ash can blow in and settle, and a cave with a narrow entrance can trap stale air and smoke. A shelter can become a sealed box of misery. You don't need a cosy tomb. You need breathing room. Mainstream fact slipped into your decision-making. Many prehistoric people did use caves and rock shelters, but the archaeological record shows plenty of open-air camps too. Structures made of wood, hide, brush, and bone. Caves weren't always the default, and sometimes they were avoided depending on conditions. You are living that nuance right now. You and the scarred hunter head out with a couple of others to scout. You follow the slope where rock outcrops break the wind. Nambrii. You look for overhangs, rock lips, shallow shelters that block falling ash without turning into gas bowls. You test the air with your face. If it feels stale, if the ash hangs and doesn't move, you move on. You find one promising spot. A long rock face with a natural ledge and a shallow recess. The entrance is wide, the ceiling low enough to block direct fall, but open enough for wind to pass. You stand at the threshold and watch how your breath fog drifts. It moves out, not just up and back, good sign. Then you do something that seems almost silly but is actually genius. You toss a pinch of ash into the air and watch it. Does it swirl inside and hang, or does it drift through and out? Here, it drifts. Airflow. That's your new obsession. If air moves, gases don't pool as easily, smoke can escape, and your lungs get a chance. Historians still argue whether early humans consciously evaluated shelters for ventilation and gas risks in a scientific sense, or whether they simply preferred places that felt right. You don't label it ventilation. You label it, this place doesn't make my chest feel weird. Same outcome. You mark the spot and go back for the group. Moving everyone is slow. Bundles, kids, elders, tools, embers, but you do it anyway because a better shelter is worth the effort. And you're careful about one more thing. The roof. Wet ash is heavy. Even dry ash adds weight. Branches can snap. Makeshift roofs can collapse. So when you build anything, you build low and angled. You avoid big flat spans that would collect ash like a bowl. If you use branches, you make them steep so ash slides off instead of piling up. When you arrive at the rock shelter, everyone exhales, some from relief, some from exhaustion. You get to work immediately because a shelter isn't a shelter until it's arranged. You lay down a layer of dry sticks and bark on the ground, a primitive floor to keep bodies off damp ash. You spread hides on top. You hang a large skin at the upwind edge, not sealing the shelter, but breaking the wind enough to reduce blowing ash. You leave gaps low and high so air can still flow. It's like building a door that never fully closes. Someone brings in bundles of dry grass. You pack it along the edges as insulation. Someone else stacks stones to make a low barrier against drifting ash. Kids are assigned simple tasks, gathering small sticks, shaking ash off hides, because giving them jobs keeps them from spiralling into fear. Also, honestly, free labour. Joke 1, congratulations. You've started a home improvement project with a workforce that's mostly tired children. What could go wrong? Now you address fire again. Fire inside a shelter is tricky. You want warmth and cooking, but you don't want smoke to hang. So you place the hearth close to the front where the airflow can pull smoke out. You keep it low and coal heavy. You dig a shallow pit and line it with stone. You build a small reflector wall behind it to bounce warmth inward. You position sleeping spots farther back, but not so deep that the air stagnates. This is a thing humans have done forever, balancing warmth and ventilation. Mainstream fact again, hearth placement and smoke management show up in archaeological sites, with soot patterns and ash deposits indicating repeated use and controlled fires. You're not drawing diagrams. You're just trying not to cough yourself awake all night. Once the shelter is set, you test it. You sit, you breathe. The ash fall outside is still visible, but inside it's reduced to a light drift like dust on a quiet day. The air feels better, not perfect, but survivable. You feel your shoulders loosen. Then comes the tricky debate. Roof versus no roof. One person wants to build an extended awning with branches and hides to enlarge the sheltered area. Another argues that anything you build could collapse under wet ash and crush someone in their sleep. You stand there, considering the weight of ash, the drizzle, the unknown. You picture a roof sagging, then snapping. You picture a child under it. Your stomach tightens. Historians still argue whether prehistoric groups preferred natural rock shelters during volcanic episodes specifically to avoid structural collapse risks, or whether they built larger structures regardless because crowding was its own hazard. The truth is, you're making a risk trade, not perfect choice. You compromise, you build a small extension, but only for storage and work, not for sleeping. You use angled supports, steep slope, you keep it low, and you accept that if it collapses, you lose stuff, not people. It's not a palace. It's a sacrificial porch. Joke 2. You've invented the first mud room, except it's an ash room, and the decor theme is grim. As evening slides in, the temperature drops. The dim sky makes it feel later than it is. The ash in the air blocks sunlight, and without sun warmth the world cools fast. People huddle closer. You distribute hides. You rotate who sits near the hearth. You keep kids in the warmest spots. You're not doing this because you're saintly. You're doing it because cold kids scream, and screaming kids attract problems. Practical compassion. Someone coughs in the back and you hear the rasp. You pass them a damp cloth. You remind them to breathe slow. You watch the way the air moves in the shelter, and you feel a small surge of pride that you chose a place that helps. Outside, the mountain rumbles again, distant, tired sounding. The ashfall is lighter now, but it hasn't stopped. It might not stop for days. You settle into the reality that your shelter needs to function for the long haul. You set rules without announcing them as rules. No one shakes ash off hides inside, that just fills the air with grit. Shake outside, downwind. No one dumps water near the entrance, it turns to sludge and tracks inside. Keep the ash room for dirty tasks, keep the sleeping area cleaner, small habits become law. Quirky tidbit time. Some groups, in later volcanic regions, used fine ash as an insulating layer, covering hot stones, burying food to slow cook, even packing it around structures to block drafts. It sounds counterintuitive, but ash can trap heat like sand. You don't go that far yet, but you do notice that a thin ash layer on the ground outside reduces mud and keeps the surface from becoming a slick swamp. The world is weirdly adaptable. You chew a bit of dried meat, sip filtered water, and listen to the ash tapping outside like soft rain. The shelter holds. The smoke drifts out. People's breathing slows as they relax. Joke 3. Tea, whispered in your head as you settle back. You always wanted a minimalist lifestyle. Turns out minimalism is easier when the volcano steals your clutter. You lie down on hides, feeling the warmth of bodies nearby, the steady pulse of the fire. Your face still feels gritty but less exposed. Your throat still aches, but the air isn't stabbing you as badly. And you realise something calming. In a world trying to erase you with ash, shelter is your little pocket of refusal. A stubborn human bubble under stone where you decide the rules for a few hours. You close your eyes, listening for changes, wind shifts, water sounds, the mountain's distant sigh. And you let sleep creep in, light and cautious, like an animal approaching a fire it doesn't fully trust. Sleep doesn't last, not really. It comes in fragments, half dreams where you're chewing ash like it's bread, waking jolts where the mountain's rumble slides into your ribs and yanks you back to alertness. But even that broken rest does something. It resets your muscles just enough that when morning tries to arrive, you can stand without feeling like you're made of snapped twigs. The first thing you notice when you step outside the rock shelter is the light. It's wrong again, flat and grey, like the sun is behind a thick hide stretched across the sky. The ashfall has thinned, but the air still carries it. Your footprints from yesterday are softened, blurred. It's as if the land is trying to edit you out. You breathe through your layered reed mask. It's become part of you now, like a second mouth. You check the valley. You check the plume. You check the wind with your little grass flag stick. The wind is weaker today, which is both good and bad. Good because less blowing ash. Bad because stagnant air invites gas pockets. The mountain always makes you pay in trade-offs. You gather the tribe, and you don't call it a meeting, but it is one. People are quieter now, not because they're calm, but because they're conserving voice and moisture. You look at faces, red eyes, cracked lips, clay-smudged cheeks, and you feel the weight of decision. This is the long walk away. Not a sprint, not a dramatic "we flee the volcano" montage. Just the relentless choice to put distance between you and a place that is now unpredictable. Mainstream fact woven into your movement. Many ancient and prehistoric groups were mobile hunter-gatherers, capable of relocating camps when resources shifted. Mobility wasn't a last resort, it was a core strategy. That flexibility is one reason humans could survive in changing environments. Today, mobility is your lifeline, but you can't just walk in any direction. The easy route is the river valley, flat, familiar, water nearby. And that is exactly why it's dangerous. Valleys channel lahars. Valleys trap heavier gases at night. Valleys can fill with ash like a bowl. The easy path is often the path where disasters travel. So you choose harder ground. You angle along higher contours, staying on slopes where air moves and where you can see what's ahead. You keep the rock shelter in mind as a fallback, but you don't want to rely on it. You want out of the mountain's reach, you pack light. The heaviest bundles go to the strongest backs. Kids are kept central. Embers are carried still. Because fire starting in damp ash world is misery. You take only tools you can't replace quickly. Everything else is left behind, and it hurts in a quiet way. Not sentimental tears, more like the stiff acceptance that you can't carry your whole past on your shoulders. Joke 1, because you need it. You realise you're doing the original decluttering, except the volcano is Marie Kondo, and it's decided none of your stuff sparks joy. The walk starts slow. The ground is uneven, covered in a thin ash layer that hides rocks. You step carefully, testing each foothold. You keep your weight low. You don't want to twist an ankle. An injured person becomes a crisis. In a world without hospitals, a sprain is basically a plot twist you don't need. Navigation is harder under a muted sky. Normally you might use the sun's position, shadows, familiar distant peaks. Now the sun is a smear. Shadows don't exist. The world feels like it's missing its compass. So you navigate by memory and by texture, the slope angle, the direction of wind, the way certain trees cluster on certain soils. You recognise a line of basalt boulders that always run like a broken wall through the forest. You follow them because stone doesn't get confused by ash. Quirky tidbit time. There's evidence from various prehistoric contexts that people use distinctive landscape features, outcrops, river bends, unusual trees, as wayfinding markers long before maps. Some scholars even suggest early songline-style navigation, where stories encode routes and landmarks. You don't sing a formal map song, but you do mutter familiar phrases under your breath, a rhythm of remembered places. It steadies you. Historians still argue whether prehistoric navigation relied more on cognitive maps built from daily movement, or on culturally transmitted route knowledge, shared memory as infrastructure. You suspect it's both. Your feet know the land, and your tribe knows the stories. As you move, you watch for the scraps of sun the outline promised, and you find them. Tiny shifts in brightness. The sky isn't uniformly grey, it's layered. One part is slightly lighter, where the sun is behind the veil. You keep that lighter patch to your left as you angle sideways away from the plume. It's not precise. It's enough. The forest changes as you go. In the ash zone, branches are sagging, leaves dulled, undergrowth flattened. Farther along the contour, you start seeing patches where the ash layer is thinner, where leaves still show green beneath dust. It's like walking through the gradient of a disaster. Less severe, less oppressive. Your lungs notice first. You cough less, your eyes sting slightly less. Then you come across the first truly dangerous easy route temptation. A broad game trail dropping into a sheltered gully. It looks inviting, protected from wind with a faint trickle of water. People's heads turn toward it instinctively, thirsty and tired. But you pause. You toss a pinch of ash into the gully entrance and watch it. It sinks and lingers. No airflow, a bowl. You smell faint sourness too, your stomach tightens. You shake your head. You steer the group past it. Joke 2. You feel like you've become that annoying friend on hikes who says, actually this shortcut will kill us. Except you're right, and nobody wants to admit it. The day drags. The ash thins, then thickens again as wind shifts. It's not a straight line of improvement, it's patches. You learn to treat the world like a patchwork quilt. Some squares are safer, some are traps. At one point, the ground trembles hard enough that a few people stumble. A small cascade of loose stones clatters down a slope. Everyone freezes, listening. The mountain's rumble is distant now, but the earth still carries echoes. You realise the eruption isn't a single event. It's a series of pulses. The mountain has aftershocks, mood swings. Mainstream fact, again, volcanic activity can include multiple explosive phases, tremors, and secondary hazards long after the initial eruption. People who return too soon can be caught by later events. You don't plan to return soon. You plan to keep moving. You find a resting spot on a small ridge where wind moves steadily. You sit. You drink filtered water you've carried in gourds, careful not to waste. You chew dried meat slowly, letting your body refill. Kids slump against adults. Someone starts picking ash out of their hair like it's lice. Another person shakes their mask and coughs. You look out across the land and notice something eerie. A faint haze line in the distance where the ash cloud ends and clearer air begins. It's like the border between two worlds. You fixate on it. That's your target. Not a specific place, but the idea of cleaner air. As you continue, you cross a small rise and feel a real gust of wind. Cleaner, cooler. It hits your face and you almost laugh. It's the first time air has felt like air in days. You inhale cautiously, then deeper. Your throat still scratches, but less. You hear someone behind you sigh out loud, a sound that's half relief, half disbelief. Historians still argue whether some prehistoric groups could track the extent of volcanic fallout accurately enough to plan multi-day detours, or whether they simply moved until conditions improved. You're somewhere in between. You're planning with what you can see, and you're trusting your body's feedback. Late in the day, you spot animals again, small ones first. A bird flits between branches, then another. Their presence is like a green shoot in burned ground. Where birds return, insects return. Where insects return, plants recover. Where plants recover, prey animals return. Your mind starts rebuilding the food chain like a ladder back to normal life. You follow the signs, always sideways, never directly down the valley. The terrain is tiring but safer. You keep your group together by calling softly, by using hand signals, by pausing at landmarks so nobody gets lost in the grey. Joke 3. Very sleepy. You realise you're basically running the world's worst group tour. On your left is ash. On your right is also ash. Please keep your hands inside the disaster at all times. As evening approaches, you find a new potential shelter. Another rock outcrop, less dusty, with a view of the lighter sky. You test airflow. You toss ash. You watch it drift away. You decide to stop here for the night. And as you settle, you feel the strange, steady reward of the long walk. Distance. Not safety, not certainty, but distance. The mountain's breath is weaker here. The ashfall is lighter. The world is still grey, but it's starting to show hints of colour again in leaves, in bark, in the simple fact that you can see farther. You lie down with your back against stone, the group close, embers glowing. You listen to the wind, real wind moving through trees, and you let it lull you. You're still in trouble, sure, but you've done the hardest thing. You've chosen the long way, the stubborn way, the way that keeps you alive. Distance helps, but the cold doesn't care about distance. Night comes like it always does, and with the sun dimmed by ash, and the air still carrying that dry bite, temperature drops faster than your mood. You huddle near the rock outcrop you chose, and you feel how quickly comfort becomes a survival requirement. Warmth isn't luxury. Warmth is what keeps hands working, keeps children from shaking, keeps older bones from stiffening into uselessness. So you return to fire, but this time with a new respect for control. You've already learned the hard way that flame is loud. Not in sound, but in consequences. Smoke stings lungs already scraped raw by ash. Bright light signals your location. Sparks in dry brush can turn a bad night into a legendary disaster. You don't want burn down the camp to be your legacy. Mainstream fact, threaded into your careful movements. By this point in deep prehistory, humans were skilled fire users. Fire was maintained, transported and used for warmth, cooking, protection and tool-making. Archaeological sites show repeated hearth use, layers of ash and charcoal, burned bones, heat-altered stones. Fire wasn't a novelty, it was infrastructure. And tonight, infrastructure has to be quiet. You set the hearth near the front of the rock shelter area, where wind can pull smoke out. But you don't build a classic open fire, you build a coal bed, small, compact, fed with fuel slowly so it stays hot without flaring. You've carried embers for days and you treat them like royalty. You nest them in dry tinder, coax them into life with slow breath through your mask, careful to keep your face turned away so you don't inhale a puff of ash and smoke at once. The first lick of flame appears, and everyone leans in as if the fire is telling a story. It's tiny, almost shy. You feed it thin sticks first, then slightly thicker ones. You shield it with your body from gusts, and you use a flat stone as a windbreak, not blocking airflow entirely, just steering it. Here's your first key trick. You choose the right wood. In damp conditions, you avoid resin-heavy branches that smoke like a bad idea. You look for dry inner wood, splitting a branch to reach the core. If you can find deadfall sheltered under rocks or fallen logs, you use that. Smoke comes from incomplete combustion and moisture. Your goal is hot and clean. Joke 1. Soft and tired. You're basically a prehistoric barista now. I'll have 1 low smoke, high heat ember roast, please. Once you have coals, you stop chasing flame. Coals give steady heat with less smoke. They're the difference between a campfire and a controlled heater. You spread them slightly, then cover part of the bed with a thin layer of ash and sand, which slows oxygen and stretches their life. You learn to bank the fire, keeping a core alive while the surface looks quiet. It's like hiding a heartbeat under a blanket. Quirky tidbit time. There are old, half-mythic, half-practical stories in many cultures about keeping hidden fire alive. Embers carried in fungi, in rotten wood, in shell containers, in tightly wrapped bundles of bark. Some of this is documented in ethnographic records, some is debated, some is folklore that still points to real techniques. You're doing your own version. Embers nestled in damp bark kept breathing just enough to survive. Historians still argue whether early humans relied more on preserving fire than on repeatedly reigniting it from scratch, especially in harsh climates or wet conditions. The truth in your hands is simple. If you can preserve fire, you should. Starting fire from nothing while coughing ash is a comedy you don't want to star in. The group arranges around the hearth like moths around a tiny sun. You put the kids closest, then the adults, then the gear. You create a heat gradient without calling it one. You position sleeping hides so nobody is so close they'll scorch, but close enough that warmth reaches. You also manage the smoke. You watch how it curls. If it starts to drift inward, you adjust your windbreak stones. You open a gap in the hide screen. You shift the hearth slightly. You keep the fire low. You learn to read smoke like you read ashfall. Mainstream fact again. Smoke management is visible in soot patterns on shelter ceilings and walls at archaeological sites, suggesting hearth placement and airflow mattered. People weren't just lighting fires, they were engineering them inside living spaces. Then comes the part no one likes, leaving the hearth for the night. Fire needs fuel, but fuel gathering in an ash world is risky. You solve it by collecting a small stockpile early, before dark. You choose larger pieces that burn longer, and you keep them under the rock lip where they stay drier. You also set aside thin kindling and tinder in a separate bundle, protected from ash and moisture. You place a couple of heat stones near the coals, rounded rocks warmed slowly so they don't crack. Once heated, you roll them into the sleeping area, not inside hides. No one wants surprise burns, but near bodies, radiating warmth. This is simple thermal storage. It's not high-tech. It works. Joke 2. You've basically invented the first space heater, except it's literally a rock, and the instruction manual is don't drop it on your foot. As the night deepens, the mountain's rumble is quieter, but it's never fully gone. It's like hearing distant thunder that never arrives. People settle, chewing small bits of food, or sipping water. You notice the small behaviours that signal safety returning. Someone braids hair, someone repairs a torn strap, someone sharpens a stone edge with slow, patient strokes. These aren't urgent tasks, they're normal tasks. Normal tasks mean your brain believes there will be a tomorrow, but the fire is still a risk. Sparks can pop, ash can swirl. If wind gusts, embers can lift. So you create rules again. Quiet, habitual. No throwing fuel, no stomping near the hearth. Kids don't play with sticks near coals. You keep a small pile of damp sand ready to smother a flare-up. You keep a water vessel nearby, but not so close it tips into the fire and fills the shelter with steam and chaos. Then, in the middle of the night, you hear it. A sudden crackle that's wrong. Not normal fire crackle, sharper. A small section of your hide screen has dried and shifted closer to the coals. The edge has started to singe. You're awake instantly, heart thumping. You lunge forward and tug it back, then dust the ember off with sand. The hide smells like burnt hair. Everyone stirs, eyes wide, then slowly relaxes when they see the fire is under control. No one says anything, but the moment hangs in the air. You're surviving the mountain, and you still almost got taken out by your own home decor. Joke 3, whispered in your mind as you sit back down. Imagine surviving a volcano and then losing to curtain too close to heater. You reposition the hide, you widen the gap for airflow, you lower the fire. You learn again that survival is mostly about managing small failures before they become big ones. As you sit, watching coals glow like sleepy eyes, and you feel the comforting rhythm of maintenance. Feed a stick, adjust a stone, check a child's breathing, bank the embers. These actions are repetitive, almost soothing. In a world turned grey and uncertain, repetition is a lullaby. Mainstream fact tucked in softly. Control of fire is one of humanity's great survival advantages, allowing expansion into colder regions and supporting social life, gathering, storytelling, shared meals. Tonight, even with ash in your lungs, fire is still the centre of your small universe, and you notice something else. The ash outside is not falling as thickly now. You step to the edge and look. The sky is still dim, but stars, faint, shy, begin to peek through gaps in cloud. Not many, but enough to make your chest ache with relief. A few points of light, like the world hasn't forgotten how to be a world. Historians still argue whether ancient eruptions could have influenced the development of myth, stories about stolen suns, angry mountains, gods of fire, because the sky's behaviour was so bizarre and frightening. You can feel how that would happen. When the heavens dim, humans reach for explanation. But for now, you don't need a myth. You need sleep. You bank the fire carefully, covering coals with ash and sand so they'll stay alive until morning. You leave a small air gap so it doesn't suffocate completely. You lie down, warmth at your back, the smell of smoke minimal, the wind whispering outside. Your breath is still a little rough, but steady. The kids are quiet. The elders' faces soften, and for a few hours, under rock and hide and a carefully controlled coal bed, you get the closest thing to peace this ash world will allow. Morning comes in that muted way again. No bright sunrise, just the gradual shift from black to grey that pretends it's daylight. The coals you banked are still alive, glowing faintly under their ash blanket. You coax them back with a few careful breaths and a sprinkle of dry tinder, and the tiny revival feels like a small miracle you made with your own hands. Now you face the truth. Surviving isn't only about lungs, water, food, shelter, and fire. It's also about stuff. Tools, containers, cordage, the boring objects that quietly decide whether your day is manageable or miserable. Because volcanic ash doesn't just bother your throat. It gets into everything. It dulls edges. It abrades fibres. It sneaks into joints and makes simple tasks, cutting, scraping, binding, harder than they should be. Your gear is taking a beating, and you can't afford to let it fail, so you start rebuilding the kit. You dump your small pile of essentials onto a hide. Stone blades, scrapers, a hammer stone, bone awls, a couple of wooden wedges, cord made from sinew or plant fibre. The sight is comforting in a weird way. These are your hands, externalised. You're not rich, but you're equipped. Mainstream fact slipped into your inventory. Prehistoric people depended on portable toolkits, stone tools, bone tools, and organic implements to process food, make shelter, and survive seasonal shifts. Archaeological sites often show activity areas where tools were made and maintained, with flakes and debris marking repeated work. You're about to create your own little debris field. First, edges. You pick up your favourite cutting flake and run your thumb carefully along it. It's still sharp. But not as sharp. Ash has been rubbing it, and you've been cutting gritty things. You decide it's time to refresh. You sit with a core stone and begin napping. Controlled strikes, angled blows, creating new flakes. Each strike is a small explosion of sound, a crack that echoes off rock. You keep it measured. The smell of stone dust mixes with ash. You choose a spot downwind so the sharp grit doesn't blow into everyone's faces. Flint napping is a skill. It's not brute force. It's reading stone like you've been reading wind and water. You strike, rotate, strike again. Flakes fall onto the hide like thin, shiny leaves. You select the best, discard the rest. The discarded flakes are still useful later as quick scrapers or cutting edges. Nothing is truly waste. Joke 1. You realise you're basically doing arts and crafts to avoid dying, which makes modern hobby stores feel slightly less adorable. Next, binding. Ash and damp have stressed your cordage. Knots slip when fibres are wet. Twine frays faster when grit gets in. You check the cords that hold your face covering, your bundles, your shelter screens. One is halfway to snapping. You replace it now, not later. You harvest plant fibres, inner bark, long grasses, twist them into cord with steady rolling motion on your thigh. You keep your hands slightly damp so ash doesn't dry your skin to cracking. The cord comes out uneven but strong. You tie it with a knot you trust. Then you test it by pulling hard. It holds. You feel a little ridiculous because the world is ash grey, and you're out here like, yes. Good knot. Quirky tidbit time. There's a fringe but persistent idea that certain volcanic regions accelerated technological innovation because people had access to high-quality stone, obsidian and mineral resources from volcanic landscapes. Obsidian, in particular, forms from volcanic glass and can be knapped into terrifyingly sharp blades. If you're lucky, your region has it. If you're very lucky, you know where it outcrops and you can reach it without dying. You don't stumble onto a sparkling obsidian treasure chest, but you do find a darker, glacier stone in a streambed farther from the ash zone. You test it with a strike. It flakes cleanly, sharper than your usual material. Your eyes widen. This is good. You collect a few nodules and stash them like they're precious, because they are. Mainstream fact. Obsidian was widely used in many prehistoric and later societies for cutting tools and traded over long distances because its sharpness and distinctive geochemistry made it valuable. People later could trace obsidian artifacts to their sources. You don't know that. You just know this stone cuts like a dream. Now trade becomes a thought. Not the modern buy and sell idea, but the ancient reality. When resources are unevenly distributed, people exchange. A volcanic disaster creates unevenness fast. Some groups will have clean water, others won't. Some will have good stone, others will have food caches. Some will have knowledge of safer routes. You're already meeting this reality. As the day progresses, you spot smoke in the distance, not from your fire, but from another group's camp. Human smoke. The scarred hunter stiffens. This could be danger. This could be opportunity. It's both. You approach cautiously, with your group visible but not aggressive, hands open, posture low. You don't want to look like raiders. You want to look like tired humans who'd rather not fight. When you reach the other group, the first thing you notice is their faces. Less ash-stained, masks less damp. They're farther from the plume. They've had slightly better air. You see their gear too. Different style of tools, different cordage patterns. These people aren't strangers in the sense of unknown species. They're strangers in the sense of uncertain intentions. There's a moment of silence where everyone tries to read everyone else. Then someone from their side holds up a dried fish, like an offering. Someone from your side holds up a chunk of glassy stone. The exchange begins without words. Historians still argue how extensive trade networks were among mobile prehistoric groups in different regions and periods, whether exchange was sporadic and local, or part of wide-ranging social networks. But you can feel the logic right here. When disaster hits, connections matter. You trade because it reduces risk. You offer a few flakes of the sharp dark stone and a bone awl. In return, they offer dried fish and a woven mat that's tighter than yours. Better filtration material. You almost laugh with relief. This is exactly what you need. Better face covering layers, better protection against ash. Joke 2. You're bartering like a pro, and you can't help thinking, wow. Capitalism would be so much nicer if it was just sharp rock for fish and everyone went home. The interaction stays polite but cautious. You share information more than goods. The direction the ash is heavier, the valley with the gas pocket, the ridge route that worked. They nod, add their own notes, a spring farther east with clearer water, a rock shelter that stays dry, a warning about a muddy channel that surged after rain. This is knowledge trade, and it's arguably more valuable than fish. Mainstream fact, humans share information socially as a survival strategy. Cultural transmission, learning from others without personal trial, is one of the things that makes humans so adaptable. You leave with your new mat and fish and you feel the tribe's mood shift. People stand a little straighter, they're still tired, but they're less trapped. The world feels slightly larger than your immediate crisis. Back at your camp, you use the woven mat immediately. You cut it into strips, layer it in your face coverings, and the difference is noticeable. Breathing becomes less scratchy. You keep the best piece for the kids. You also use some of the mat as a pre-filter for water, pouring through it before moss and charcoal. It traps larger particles. You feel like you just upgraded your entire system. You also repair. You patch holes in hides with sinew. You retie bundle straps. You sharpen scrapers for hide cleaning. You check the embers container. You check the water gourds for leaks. Volcanic ash is relentless. It finds weaknesses, so you preemptively remove weaknesses. Historians still argue whether technological maintenance, sharpening, retouching tools, repairing containers was the main driver of day-to-day labour in some prehistoric groups, more than hunting itself. Looking at your day, it sure feels like it. You've spent hours keeping your equipment functional so you can hunt, move, cook, and shelter. As evening approaches, you're not just surviving, you're stabilising. You have slightly better food from trade, slightly better filtration, slightly better stone. The ash is still there, but you're not as helpless against it. You're building a small cushion of capability. Joke 3, sleepy and satisfied. You're basically running a little startup called Don't Die Incorporated, and today you secured your first strategic partnership. You bank the fire, tuck tools safely away from ash drift, and lie down with a sharper blade and a fuller belly than yesterday. The mountain still rumbles somewhere far off, but your world is no longer only reaction. It's also repair, exchange, invention. And that's how humans outlast disasters, by turning chaos into routines, and routines into resilience. Resilience is great until you remember you're not alone inside your own skull. You're in a group, and groups are wonderful. Warmth, shared labour, shared knowledge, and also exhausting, because humans come with opinions. Volcanic ash doesn't just fall on your hair, it falls on everyone's nerves, and then those nerves start snapping like dry twigs. By now you've got systems: water filtering, low smoke fire, tool maintenance, scouting routes, but systems only work if people keep cooperating. And pressure has a way of turning cooperation into conflict, quietly at first, then loudly. You see it in small things. Someone takes an extra sip from the gourd, someone hoards a piece of dried fish, someone complains that they did all the wood gathering yesterday, someone else rolls their eyes. It's not villainy, it's stress trying to find a place to go. Mainstream fact woven into the tension. Prehistoric hunter-gatherer groups relied heavily on cooperation, sharing food, childcare, tool-making, information, because individual survival odds were lower alone. Social cohesion mattered. When cohesion broke, groups could split, migrate, or suffer. This isn't modern drama. This is survival math. You step into the role nobody formally appoints but everyone quietly needs. The organiser, not a king, not a boss. More like the person who keeps the day from dissolving into chaotic coughing and accusations. The scarred hunter is still the authority on movement and danger signs, but leadership in a band is often shared, situational. Today, the situation is social stability. So you do what you can. You start by making the work visible. You divide tasks without barking orders. 2 people collect and split fuel wood. 2 filter water. 1 watches kids. 1 scouts a short distance and returns. You rotate tasks so no one feels used. It sounds obvious, but under stress, obvious things get forgotten. Joke 1, because your tired brain needs the laugh. Congratulations, you've become a prehistoric project manager. The only KPI is nobody dies, and the performance reviews are done by wolves. The first real flare-up happens over food. The fish you traded for is finite, and hunger has a way of making humans mean in small, sharp ways. Someone suggests saving all the fish for the strongest hunters because they'll bring more food later. Someone else snaps back that the kids need it more. Voices rise. You feel your chest tighten. Not from ash, from the sound of conflict. You step between them, not aggressively, just present. You make eye contact. You remind everyone of something simple. If the kids weaken, the group weakens. If elders weaken, knowledge weakens. If the strongest eat everything, the strongest become strong alone, and alone is stupid. You don't deliver a speech. You just say the truth like it's a stone you put on the ground. This is how we last. Historians still argue how egalitarian prehistoric groups were in practice. How much food sharing was fair versus influenced by status, age, sex, or skill. In some contexts, sharing seems widespread. In others, there are hints of inequality, but in this moment, you're steering toward fairness because fairness keeps the group intact. You set a simple rule. Kids and elders get first share, then everyone else, then leftovers. You don't call it a rule. You just do it. And people follow because deep down, most humans want structure when the world is falling apart. Another tension simmers. Fear. Some people want to keep moving farther away immediately because any rumble from the mountain makes their skin crawl. Others want to stay where you've established routines and where trade contact exists because movement feels like gambling. Both instincts are valid. Both can tear you apart. So you lean on the scarred hunter's strength. He knows routes, he knows signs, but you also lean on a different kind of authority, story. You gather people near the low fire as evening approaches and you let someone talk. Not just entertain. Frame the experience. Quirky tidbit time. In many societies, crisis stories include instructions hidden inside. What to do when the sky darkens, which direction to go, which animals to follow, which taboos to respect. Some scholars argue oral traditions can preserve information about rare disasters, like eruptions or tsunamis, for generations. It's debated how accurately, but the possibility is real. Tonight, you're making new oral tradition in real time. An older person speaks about an eruption long ago, maybe real, maybe embellished. They describe animals fleeing sideways, water turning bitter, the need to sleep where wind moves. Everyone listens. You notice people's breathing slow. Fear becomes a narrative, and narrative becomes manageable. Mainstream fact tucked into the warmth. Shared rituals and storytelling can reduce anxiety and maintain group cohesion, even in small bands. That's not just culture. That's an adaptive behaviour. But you also have to handle the darker stuff, blame. Someone mutters that the mountain is angry because someone broke a taboo, ate the wrong thing, disrespected a place, had the wrong kind of argument at the wrong time. You can feel how tempting blame is. It gives fear a target. It makes randomness feel moral. You don't stomp it out harshly, because harshness creates enemies. You redirect it. You say gently that the mountain does what it does, and your job is to watch and move smart. You suggest a small offering, placing a bit of food on a stone away from camp. Not because you're sure it works, but because rituals can calm people, and calm people make better decisions. Historians still argue whether early ritual responses to disasters were primarily spiritual belief or pragmatic social engineering. The line is blurry. Tonight you don't need to solve that argument. You need to keep the tribe from fracturing. So you let the ritual happen, small and harmless. Joke 2, whispered in your head. Sometimes the best leadership move is letting people appease the volcano with a snack, as long as the volcano doesn't start requesting a full buffet. You also watch for quiet despair. Not everyone argues, some just withdraw. A young adult sits apart, staring into the ash-dark sky, eyes empty. You recognise that look. The mind trying to shut down to conserve energy. It's dangerous. People who detach stop noticing hazards. You sit near them without forcing conversation. You offer water. You offer a small piece of tuber. You point out something simple. A bird call in the distance. The faint return of normal sounds. You give their brain a hook back into the living world. It's not therapy, but it's human. Then there's the practical leadership, making sure everyone understands the plan. Tomorrow you'll send scouts along the lateral route the deer took. You'll keep camp ready to move. You'll maintain contact with the other group if possible. You'll keep filtering water. You'll keep fires low. Repetition, stability. You say it enough that it becomes a shared expectation instead of one person's wish. Mainstream fact. In small groups, communication and shared mental models of what's happening are essential for coordinated action. That's true whether you're hunting or fleeing ash. Misunderstanding kills. At night you set watch shifts, not because you expect attack, but because you expect change. Wind shift, gas pocket, mud surge, animal intrusion. You rotate. Everyone gets some sleep. No one is forced to stay awake all night unless they choose to. A small argument erupts when someone tries to skip their watch. They say they're too tired. Someone else snaps that everyone is tired. You intervene again, but this time you do it with humour. You say, if you can argue, you can watch. It gets a few tired chuckles. The reluctant watcher sighs and takes the shift. Joke 3. You realise sarcasm is basically your oldest tool. Sharp enough to cut tension, but not so sharp it starts a fight. As the group settles, you listen to the small sounds. The fire's low hiss, the wind moving through branches, the occasional distant rumble. You feel how the tribe's breathing sinks as sleep takes them. You feel the fragile miracle of it. A bunch of fragile bodies choosing to stay together under pressure that could crack them. Historians still argue whether major environmental shocks like eruptions accelerated social evolution, pushing groups to form stronger alliances, merge bands, or develop new leadership structures. Tonight, you can imagine it. Disasters don't just reshape landscapes, they reshape relationships. You close your eyes, not fully relaxed, but steadier than before. The ash is still out there, but inside the small circle of firelight, you've held something more delicate than a coal bed. Trust. And trust, in a world where the mountain can cough at any moment, is its own kind of shelter. Trust holds through the night, but morning brings the weird stuff. The kind of weird that makes even the calm people glance at each other like, did you see that? Because the mountain isn't just throwing ash anymore, it's throwing your sense of reality around like it's bored. You step out into the grey day and notice the sky has a faint tint, an odd bruised colour, not quite sunrise, not quite storm. The air smells cleaner than before, then suddenly, without warning, it smells sharp again, that rotten egg bite curling into your nostrils like a rude guest. Wind shifts, and your whole mood shifts with it. Then you see the first strange light, a flicker inside the far-off plume, or like lightning trapped in a dirty blanket. It pulses and fades, then pulses again. Some people gasp. A child clutches an adult's arm. You feel your own stomach drop, even though you've already seen it once. It's not the lightning itself, it's the wrongness of lightning inside smoke. Mainstream fact grounded in your unease. Volcanic lightning is a real phenomenon. Ash particles collide and build electrical charge, and the plume can discharge it like a storm cloud. The crack can be sharper, the flash more eerie, because it's happening inside a column of ash and gas. To you, it looks like the sky's arguing with the mountain. Someone whispers a name for it. Someone makes a sign. Another person starts telling a story, already, about how the mountain has eyes, and the flickers are its blinking. You don't shut them down. You let the story exist. Because story is how humans wrap their minds around things that don't fit into normal categories. Quirky tidbit time. In some later accounts from volcanic regions, people describe blue flames, or ghost lights near vents, sometimes caused by burning gases, sometimes by electrical effects, sometimes by simple misinterpretation in low light. Not every strange light is supernatural, but humans have always been quick to turn odd chemistry into mythology. You can feel your brain reaching for that comfort. If it has meaning, maybe it's predictable. But you're also practical. You watch the plume, you watch the wind. You watch how the light flicker coincides with thicker ash pulses. You're not just being spooked, you're collecting data. The weirdness continues. Midday should be brighter, but the sun remains a pale smear. Then, for a few minutes, the light dips further, like someone turned down a lamp. The temperature drops with it. You feel goosebumps on your arms. You hear someone say, in a low voice, that the sun is being eaten. It's half joke, half fear. Historians still argue whether repeated experiences of sky-darkening events, eruptions, wildfires, dust storms, helped shape early human cosmologies about stolen suns, sky monsters, or gods that control light. You can see how quickly a community could build a shared explanation. It's easier to say, something took the sun, than the atmosphere is full of fine particles scattering light. One of those sentences is bedtime friendly. The other is not. And then the mountain adds sound. A boom rolls across the land deeper than thunder, and you feel it in your chest. A second boom follows, then a third, irregular. Like the mountain is coughing in its sleep, some of the younger ones flinch hard. Someone grabs their weapon instinctively as if you can stab a sound. Mainstream fact. Explosive eruptions can produce shockwaves and loud detonations, sometimes audible far away. Even when you're not near lava, the energy travels. Your body responds like it's predator danger, because loud, sudden, deep noises are how the world tells you to run. Your tribe reacts in different ways. Some freeze, some start packing immediately, Some start praying. A couple of people start arguing about whether the booms mean the mountain is calming down or getting worse. That's the funny thing about fear. It will interpret the same signal in opposite directions just to keep you stressed. So you do what you've learned to do. You narrow the problem. What do you actually need to know? You need to know if the ashfall is increasing. You need to know if the wind is turning toward you. You need to know if the ground is trembling more. You need to know if water is changing. Everything else is noise, even if the noise is terrifying. You send a scout a short distance up to a higher point. They return with a simple report. The plume is still active but drifting away. Ashfall here is light. Wind is mostly steady. That's good. The booms are distant reminders, not immediate threats. Still, rumours travel faster than ash. Someone from the other group you traded with arrives breathless, saying a valley to the south filled with thick, choking air overnight, and animals were found collapsed. They're spooked, and their fear spills into your camp like spilled water. You listen. You ask where. You mark it mentally as another low-pocket hazard. You share your own notes. Avoid gullies, avoid sheltered dips, keep to moving air. The information exchange calms them a little, and it reinforces a crucial social tool, networks. You're not alone in the landscape. Other humans are also reading the mountain, and their readings help you. Joke 1, it's like the world's worst neighbourhood app. Warning, invisible death gas reported in South Gully. Please avoid. Later you notice something even stranger. Fine ash drifting in shimmering curtains at ground level, not falling from above but sliding sideways like fog. It looks almost beautiful in the dim light, soft ghostly sheets. But you've learned beauty can be bait. You watch how it hugs the ground. You smell the air. It's slightly sour. You steer everyone up a small rise away from it. The mainstream fact. Ground-hugging flows can be many things. Cold air drainage carrying gas, or simply ash-laden fog. The truly deadly version in volcanic settings is pyroclastic flow. Hot, fast, unstoppable. You're far enough that you're not seeing that kind of speed or heat, but the principle remains. If something hugs the ground and doesn't behave like normal wind, treat it with suspicion. You also start noticing changes in the night sky. When evening comes, the stars look different. Not their positions, those are steady, but their clarity. Some nights they're sharp. Other nights they're hazy, as if seen through smoke. The moon, when it appears, is tinted faintly reddish or yellow. It's eerie. Mainstream fact. Aerosols and fine particles in the atmosphere can scatter light and cause unusual sunsets and moon colours. Later, people wrote about spectacular red sunsets after big eruptions. You don't write. You just stare and feel the world's mood shift. Quirky tidbit time. Some later observers described dry fog after eruptions. A haze that didn't smell like ordinary smoke and didn't behave like normal mist. It could persist, making sunlight dim and irritating breathing. The phrase itself sounds like a riddle. But you're living it. Fog without wetness. Haze without rain. Historians still argue how far-reaching such atmospheric effects were in prehistory, and how quickly they impacted distant populations. Without instruments, it's hard to reconstruct exactly what early humans experienced day by day, but your throat is your instrument, your eyes are your data, and they're telling you the air is not normal. The tribe responds by creating meaning. Thus kids start asking questions. Why is the sky blinking? Why is the sun weak? Why does the wind smell bad sometimes? Adults answer in half-truths and metaphors. Some say the mountain is angry. Some say the sky is sick. Some say the sun is hiding. You add your own answer, softer. You say the mountain throws dust and the dust makes light tired. You say the wind carries smells, and sometimes you need to move so you can breathe better. You don't promise it will end soon. You don't say everything will be fine. You say we're watching. We're moving smart. That's the kind of comfort that doesn't crumble later. Joke 2, very gentle. You realise you've become a bedtime storyteller in the worst possible setting, except instead of "and they lived happily ever after," it's "and they avoided the gas pocket." That night, someone suggests leaving a few small markers, stacked stones, along the route you've taken. So if you need to backtrack or reunite with the trade group, you can. You do it. Small cairns, simple. They're not permanent in a world of ash and rain, but they might last long enough to matter. Mainstream fact. Humans have long used simple markers and landmark-based navigation. While we can't always prove cairns in deep prehistory, the concept of marking routes is ancient and practical. You're not carving runes. You're stacking stones and hoping they don't fall. As you settle near the low fire, you hear the distant booms again, fainter now. The plume flickers once like a slow blink. The sky's weird tint fades into night. Historians still argue whether such dramatic sensory experiences, thunderous sounds, darkness at midday, or lightning in ash, accelerated the spread of certain myths and taboos, shaping cultural memory for generations. You can feel the seed of it in your group already. They will tell stories about this night. They will exaggerate. They will warn their children. They will build rules. Don't camp in gullies, follow deer sideways, keep fire low, cover your face. And those rules, wrapped in story, might save someone later. Joke 3, Sleepy. You're basically writing the first Volcano safety manual, but the formatting is elders yelling at teenagers. You bank the fire. You check that everyone's masks are within reach for night coughing fits. You listen for wind shifts, and you let the strange lights and strange sounds fade into the background, turning from terror into information, from information into routine. Because the weird becomes survivable the moment you stop being surprised by it. The weird becomes routine, sure, until your body starts tallying the damage like an accountant who never sleeps. By now you've got ash in your hair, ash in your clothes, ash in your thoughts, and your lungs feel like they've been rubbed with dry grass. You wake with a cough that sits deep and stubborn, and you can taste the day before you even open your eyes. Bitter dust, faint smoke, and that sour edge that comes and goes with the wind. This is the section where you stop pretending you're invincible and start doing what prehistoric people did constantly, patching up the fragile animal body you live in. Mainstream fact first, because it matters. In hunter-gatherer life, injuries and illness were common, and people used plant-based remedies, rest, heat, and practical care to manage them. We know this from ethnographic parallels, from wear patterns on skeletons that show healed fractures, and from archaeological hints of medicinal plant use and care. You don't have a pharmacy, but you do have knowledge and improvisation. The biggest problems are obvious: coughing, irritated eyes, chapped skin, and the kind of fatigue that makes you clumsy. Then there are the smaller injuries: a burn from the hearth, a scraped knee from hidden rocks under ash, cracked lips that bleed when you smile. So you stop smiling for a bit. You start with the lungs. Someone in the group has that barking, dry cough that sounds worse than yours. They're not feverish, but their chest tightens when they breathe. You don't have a stethoscope, you do have ears and worry. You give them the best mask material you have, layered mat plus damp cloth, and you keep them out of a heavy smoke. You move them closer to the shelter's airflow. You make them drink small sips often, because hydration helps soothe irritated throats. You also try steam, not boiling hot, not scalding, just warm vapour from a pot placed near coals, with a hide draped to trap gentle warmth. Too much steam in an ash-laden shelter is risky, but a little warmth can loosen the harshness in the chest. Quirky tidbit time. Across many later cultures, people used aromatic plants in steam. Think of herbs tossed onto hot stones, both for perceived spiritual cleansing and for real nasal relief. You don't have a labelled jar of eucalyptus, but you do have whatever grows nearby. You crush a few fragrant leaves, toss them near the warm vessel, and the air shifts. Maybe it helps. Maybe it's placebo. But placebo isn't nothing when you're trying to keep panic from sitting on your lungs. Historians still argue whether early medicinal practices were primarily empirical, trial and error refined across generations, or primarily symbolic and ritual, with any physical benefit being incidental. You suspect it's both. People keep what works and they keep what feels meaningful. Survival has room for both. Next, eyes. Red, gritty eyes are everywhere. You've already used leaf-infused rinses cautiously, but now you formalise the routine. You take the clearest water you can filter and reserve a small portion specifically for eye care. That sounds extravagant until you remember. Blind people can't forage or navigate. Eyes are tools. You rinse by dribbling water from a cleanish leaf or gourd, sus letting it run across the lids and corners. You use a soft piece of moss as a dabber, not a scrubber. No rubbing. You repeat. You show kids how to blink slowly and tilt their heads. You make it a calm ritual so they don't panic and start clawing at their faces. Mainstream fact. Irritation from ash is mechanical, and gentle rinsing helps remove particles. Again, you don't say mechanical, but your eyes understand. Skin comes next. Ash dries you out. Wind dries you out. The whole disaster is basically one long dehydration seminar. Your hands crack, your lips split, your cheeks feel tight. You use animal fat, rendered from meat or stored from earlier, to coat exposed skin lightly. It repels some ash and locks in moisture. It also makes you smell like dinner, which is not ideal, but you're already surrounded by humans and smoke and fear. So smell management is not top priority. You also use clay, again, not just as a barrier, but as a soothing cool layer on irritated areas. You mix it with a little water to make a paste, smooth it on, let it dry, then brush it off gently. It takes some itchiness with it. Joke 1 because you deserve to laugh. You're basically running a spa called Ash and Trauma, where the treatments are free and the ambience is existential dread. Then there are burns and cuts. Someone got too close to the coals and blistered a finger. Another slipped on ash-slick rock and scraped their shin. You clean wounds with the cleanest water available, again sparingly. You don't pack ash into wounds. Nice try, Volcano. But you do use clean plant fibres and cloth to wrap. You consider using honey, if you had it. Because honey is naturally antimicrobial in many contexts, but you don't. You do have resin from trees which can seal small cuts like a crude bandage. You warm a bit near the fire until it's pliable, then smear it lightly on a minor scrape to keep dirt out. It stings. It seals. It's not pretty. Quirky tidbit. Some groups historically use spider webs as wound dressings because they can act as a physical barrier and help clotting. It sounds like a campfire story until you remember spider silk is strong and sticky. You find a few clean webs under a rock lip and carefully press them onto a small cut. It works surprisingly well. The person receiving it looks disgusted, then grateful, which is the correct emotional arc for you're wearing spiders as medicine. Joke 2. You try not to think about the spider who's going to come home later like, "Oh, excuse me, where is my entire house?" Now the sneaky injury, mental strain. People are jumpy. The kids startle at every rumble. Adults snap at each other, then apologise awkwardly. Nightmares creep in. You can feel stress turning into sickness. Tight chests, headaches, stomach upset. You handle it the only way you can. You create calm pockets. You keep routines steady. Morning. Water filtering, face cleaning, tool checking. Midday. Scouting, foraging, repairs. Evening. Low fire, shared food, story. Predictability soothes brains. Mainstream fact, social support and routine can help humans cope with trauma and stress. Again, you don't say trauma-informed care, you just say, we do it this way, and people relax because someone sounds certain. You also give people jobs that match their abilities. Yeah, an older person who can't hike far becomes the keeper of embers and the organiser of water-settling bowls. A teenager who's restless becomes a scout, with clear boundaries and return times. A child becomes a musk checker, proudly reminding others to keep cloth damp. It's adorable and also effective. People need to feel useful. Historians still argue whether role specialisation in small prehistoric bands was mostly flexible and situational, or more fixed by age and status. Tonight, it's situational. Whoever can do a thing does it. You keep an eye out for worsening illness. If someone develops a fever, if their cough becomes wet and heavy, if they struggle to breathe even in cleaner air, that's a different crisis. But mostly you're dealing with irritation and exhaustion, not plague. You treat, you rest, you hydrate, you monitor. At one point, the scarred hunter's voice goes hoarse, and he looks annoyed, like his own body is inconveniencing him. You hand him warm water and gesture that he should speak less. He gives you a look that says, "I don't take orders." Then he drinks anyway. Victory. Joke 3. You realise even in the Stone Age, leadership is mostly convincing stubborn people to do obvious things without them noticing. As the days pass, you notice small improvements. Eyes are less red. Coughs are less frequent in areas where ash is lighter. Skin stops cracking as badly when you maintain the fat and clay barrier. Injuries heal because you keep them clean and covered. People start laughing a little more, but you don't get complacent. The mountain is still there. The air is still sometimes wrong, so you keep the care routines as if they're sacred. And not because you're dramatic, but because they work. You end the day sitting by the low fire, feeling the warmth on your face, and you realise something quietly profound. The eruption didn't just test your ability to run and hide. It tested your ability to maintain life, breath by breath, wound by wound, mood by mood. And you're doing it, not perfectly, but enough. You wake up and realise the air has changed, not dramatically, not like a miracle trumpet blaring, "Congratulations," but subtly, like someone cracked a window in a stuffy room. Your first inhale doesn't bite as hard. Your cough is still there, but it's lazier, less urgent. Even the ash drifting down looks thinner, finer, like the sky's finally getting tired of its own performance, and that's when the most dangerous thought arrives. Maybe it's over. Not over. Not everything is normal again. But the kind of over that tempts you to walk back into the grey world as if it can't surprise you anymore. So you don't rush. You test. You approach the land the way you approach a wary animal. Slow, sideways, eyes open. Mainstream fact tucked into your caution. Volcanic hazards don't end when ash stops falling. After an eruption, there can still be unstable slopes, ash-choked waterways, lahars after rainfall, lingering gas emissions and secondary collapses. People can be injured or killed days, weeks, even months later by what comes after the big dramatic moment. The volcano's after-party is often worse than the main event, and it does not care if you're tired. You decide to send a small scouting party, light and fast, to check the nearest old paths and see what's actually changed. You go too, because you trust your eyes more than rumours. You keep masks on, but looser now, ready to tighten if the wind shifts. You carry water, a blade, and a bundle of cord. The basics. The rest can wait. As you move, you notice the land has an uncanny quiet. Not total silence anymore. Birds are back in scattered pockets, but the soundscape feels thinner. Your feet crunch on a surface that didn't exist before. Ash compacted into a faint crust, like the earth grew a new skin overnight. When you scrape it with a stick, it breaks into powder again. You learn quickly where it's stable and where it's deceptive. You reach a familiar bend in the terrain and stop, surprised by grief you didn't know you'd packed. A grove of shrubs you used for berries is coated grey, leaves drooping, some snapped under the weight of earlier wet ash. And it looks like the plant is exhausted. You touch a leaf. Ash smears your fingertip. Underneath, a hint of green survives. That's the first lesson of returning. Nothing is fully dead, and nothing is fully safe. You push farther and find the old stream you used to rely on. It's running again, clearer than before but still cloudy, still suspicious around the edges. You kneel and sniff. The sour bite is faint. You watch the surface. No dead insects now. No strange slick. You scoop a little into a bowl, let it settle, and the top clears faster than it did days ago. You don't drink yet. You test with patience because patience is cheaper than sickness. You also check the banks. Here's the hidden danger. The ash has changed the way the stream behaves. Where the water used to cut a stable channel, it now undercuts soft deposits. The edges crumble when you step too close. A person could slip in easily and the water, cold, fast, could do the rest. Not dramatic, just stupid. You step back. You mark the safe crossing points with stones. Joke 1, very sleepy. The earth is basically renovated without telling you, and the new design feature is surprise collapse. You continue toward your old camp region, not because you're eager to go back, but because you need to know if it's even possible. The closer you get, the thicker the ash layer becomes again. It's like walking into a darker version of your own memory. The air feels heavier. Your throat tightens. You pull the mask snugger. Your eyes narrow. Your body votes against staying. Then you see it. The old hearthstones, half buried, like a half-remembered face under a blanket. The campsite is still there, but softened. Footprints are gone. Tool flakes are hidden. The world has pressed erase on the details, and yet some things are preserved. A shallow depression where someone slept is still visible. The ash settled into the shape. A broken branch you used as a drying rack is frozen mid-fall, half buried. It's eerie. It's like the land has kept your outline but forgotten your story. Mainstream fact. Volcanic ash layers can preserve impressions and surfaces in remarkable detail, creating snapshots that later archaeologists can read. Footprints, post holes, activity surfaces. Your camp is becoming a record, whether you like it or not. You don't linger long. You take what you can. Maybe a tool you left, maybe a hide strap that isn't ruined, and you go back to cleaner air. Returning isn't moving back. Returning is recon. On the way back, you wastikund. You test the vegetation the way you test water. You pluck a leaf, rub it between fingers, smell it. The smell is muted by ash, but it's there. You check berries, some ruined, some intact under leaves. You dig a tuber. The inside is clean again, pale and firm. That's the trick with tubers. They hide underground, and underground is safer from ash than you are. Quirky tidbit time. There's a phenomenon where seeds and roots survive ash burial and rebound quickly, and in some volcanic regions people later noticed that new growth after eruptions could be unusually vigorous. Some even treated the post-ash landscape as a kind of reset. New plants, new opportunities, though the first months could be brutal. You don't call it ecological succession, but you can see the earlier step, green trying to return. You also check for animals. Not big herds yet, but signs, fresh droppings, hoof prints where the ash crust broke, the faint scrape marks of something foraging. You spot a hare darting between brush, cleaner fur than before, which tells you it's living in a less ash pocket. Your stomach does a happy little flip. Food is returning slowly. Historians still argue whether prehistoric groups returned to eruption zones quickly to exploit reset resources, like new plant growth attracting animals, or whether fear and lingering hazards kept people away longer. You can feel both instincts in yourself, the pull of familiar territory and the push of caution. You choose a middle path again. You won't move back under the plume, but you might edge closer when conditions truly stabilise. Back at your current camp, you report what you saw in simple terms. Water is improving, but banks are unstable. Ash is thicker near the old site. Plants are bruised but alive. Animals are returning in patches. Air is still worse closer to the mountain. The group absorbs it like thirsty soil. This information becomes your new map. Now comes planting trust. Except you're not planting seeds in tidy rows. You're planting habits. You begin taking short daily foraging loops outward, always returning to the safe airflow camp. You test different directions. You mark routes with small stone stacks. You designate a no-go list. Gullies, low dips, certain valleys that smell wrong, river channels that could turn to mud flows after rain. You also set a rule about rain. If heavy rain begins, you move to higher ground immediately. No debate. No wait and see, because wet ash changes everything. Joke 2. You realise your new weather forecast is basically, if the sky looks like it's thinking about crying, you relocate like you owe it money. One afternoon, you get a reminder that hidden danger is real. A scout returns coughing harder, eyes wide. They wandered into a low pocket where the air felt thick and sour, like breathing through a wet hide. They didn't see anything. They just felt wrong and backed out fast. Everyone listens closely. You add that pocket to the map of places you don't sleep near, don't rest near, don't let kids play near. Invisible hazards become named hazards. Mainstream fact again. Volcanic gases can persist and accumulate in low-lying areas, especially where airflow is poor. Even long after the ashfall, these spots can remain dangerous. Your scout's experience is the kind of thing that becomes a story later. Don't go into the hollow where the air is dead. As days pass, your routines shift from emergency mode to recovery mode. Masks stay nearby but are used less. Water filtering remains, but the settling time shortens as streams clear. Food becomes less desperate. More fresh plant matter, more small game. The tribe starts repairing things with more care than urgency, like they believe their hands will have long-term use again. Then you face the question you've been avoiding. Do you settle somewhere new permanently, or do you keep moving as a long detour? You look at the land with new eyes. Some areas will be barren for a while, some will recover quickly, some will be richer later, but riskier now. You weigh it all without spreadsheets, just instinct and shared knowledge. Historians still argue whether major eruptions pushed prehistoric populations into long-term relocations that reshaped their social networks, or whether many groups returned and reoccupied familiar territories once conditions stabilised. You can imagine both outcomes. You can feel how one disaster can branch into two futures. Joke 3, quiet. You wish the mountain had left a sign that says safe to return, please form an orderly line, but apparently customer service is not available. By the end of the day, you stand at the edge of your camp and watch a thin shaft of sunlight break through the haze for a moment. Real brightness, not the usual dull smear. It lands on the ground and makes the ash sparkle faintly, like crushed shells. It's beautiful in a way that annoys you, because how dare the apocalypse have aesthetics? You breathe in. See. It still scratches a little, but it's breathable. You breathe out. And in that exhale, you feel the first real shift from surviving the eruption to surviving the aftermath. Slower choices, cautious steps, tested water, measured returns. You're not back yet. You're edging toward back, one careful loop at a time, building trust in the land the way you build trust in a skittish animal, by showing it you're not stupid. Edging toward back turns into something stranger. You start realizing the ash isn't only an enemy, it's also a blanket that remembers. Every day you move through this altered landscape, you notice the way the grey layer holds stories in it. Stories you didn't write on purpose, but wrote anyway with your feet, your hands, your fires. You wake and step outside, and the ground shows yesterday like it happened 5 minutes ago. A trail of prints, your prints, pressed into soft ash. The small stagger of a child who got distracted, the straight, heavy steps of the scarred hunter, the little scuffs where someone dragged a bundle. It's all there, crisp as if the world kept receipts. Mainstream fact whispered into your morning, ash layers can preserve footprints and activity surfaces with remarkable detail, and in some volcanic contexts those prints can last long enough to be covered by later layers and fossilized. It's how we end up with ancient human footprints preserved in volcanic materials in various places across the world. You don't know you're standing in a medium that can outlast you. You just know the ground is weirdly honest. You find yourself stepping carefully, not just to avoid slipping, but because you don't like how visible you are. Normally the land swallows your passage quickly. Wind, rain, animals, time. Now, ash holds it. You're trackable. Predators could read you like a book. Other humans could read you too. So you begin doing something subtle. You sweep. Not obsessively, not everywhere, but around camp. You scuff over the most obvious tracks near shelter and water. You use a branch to brush away the cleanest footprints. It's not perfect, but it's a new behaviour born from a new world. Hide your patterns because the ground is recording them. Historians still argue how often prehistoric people deliberately concealed tracks or managed campsite signatures, versus simply accepting that the landscape always held traces. In your case, ash makes the trace louder, so you respond. You become a little more secretive, a little more aware of your own imprint. At the same time, you can't help noticing the other side. The ash also preserves clues you can use. You spot a set of hoof prints, fresh, crisp. Deer. They passed in the early morning, headed toward a patch of greener shrubs. You follow, quietly. The ash shows you exactly where they went, like a silent guide. Joke 1. You realise the Volcano accidentally installed a tracking app on the ground, and you're using it for deer updates. New notification, hooves detected. You also find animal sign you'd never see in normal soil. Tiny paw prints of a fox, delicate bird tracks, the drag line of a lizard tail, all of it painted in grey. The landscape has become a giant ledger of movement. That changes your hunting. Instead of relying only on scent and broken twigs, you rely on print patterns, spacing, direction, speed. You can tell if an animal was walking calmly or bolting. You can tell if it hesitated. You can tell where it turned sharply, where it left the open and dove into cover. You feel your hunting skill evolve in real time, shaped by the ash. You didn't ask for this training ground, but you're getting it. And then you notice human traces that aren't yours. Near a shallow ridge, you find footprints that cut across yours, heading toward the east. They're older, edges softened slightly by breeze, but still readable. Smaller group by the spacing, one limping step among them. You freeze, listening. No voices, no smoke. They're gone. Your mind runs through possibilities. The trade group, another band, raiders, lost people. Historians still argue about the frequency of intergroup conflict in different prehistoric times and places. How often bands fought versus avoided each other. You can't solve that debate, but you feel it in your spine. Humans are both help and hazard. You follow the prints briefly, just enough to see direction, then stop. You don't chase. You mark it mentally. You return to your own route. The ash is a map, but you don't have to read every line. Back at camp, you notice your own structures are leaving archaeology behind. The hearth area is a dark patch of charcoal and ash, distinct from volcanic ash. A ring of stones, a shallow pit. If you left today and never returned, someone far in the future could find this and say, people were here. It's a strange thought, not fully formed, like a dream you can't quite hold. Mainstream fact. Hearths, charcoal lenses, tool flakes and post holes are exactly the kinds of traces archaeologists look for in ancient sites. Volcanic ash can seal them, preserving them. Disasters can create neat time slices in the ground. You're living on a time slice. Quirky tidbit time. There's a fringe fascination, part science, part romance. with the idea that volcanic events can create Pompeii-like preservation moments, even in much older contexts, preserving snapshots of daily life. It's rare, it's debated, but the concept is real enough that ash layers are prized as chronological markers in archaeology. You don't know the word tephrochronology, but you're walking on its raw material. You start noticing the ash layer itself varies, different colours, different textures. Some is fine and powdery. Some is gritty with little pumice grains. Some is darker, heavier. You realise these are different pulses from the mountain, different moments. If you had the patience, you could read the eruption history from the ground like tree rings. You don't have that patience, but you do have curiosity. You scrape a small cut into the ash with a stick and see layers. Yesterday's dust on top, a darker band beneath, then a lighter one. It's like the world has been stacking pages of a book, one per day. You shiver, not from cold, but from the sense of being inside a story that's writing itself under your feet. Joke 2. You realise the earth is journaling, and it is not asking for consent. The practical side returns quickly. Ash preservation means your water management needs extra care. You notice that the path between camp and the stream is becoming a trench, footprints deepening, ash compacting. When it rains, those trenches could channel water and turn into little mud rivers right through camp. So you change the route slightly, spreading foot traffic, flattening some areas, piling stones to redirect runoff. You're shaping the micro-landscape around your shelter to avoid stupid accidents. It's not civil engineering. It's, I don't want my sleeping spot to become a mudslide. You also use ash as a marker. You press your thumb into it on a boulder near a safe route. You make small, deliberate signs, scratches, stone stacks, broken twig patterns, because ash makes it easy to see what's disturbed. You create a simple language of, this way is safe, this hollow is bad, this water is clearer. It's not a map on bark. It's a map etched into movement. Historians still argue whether symbolic marking, deliberate signs in the landscape, was common in deep prehistory, or more associated with later periods. But humans mark territory and routes in countless ways, and necessity accelerates creativity. You don't carve art, you carve instruction. One afternoon, the sky clears a little more, and sunlight hits the ash at a low angle, making every footprint cast a tiny shadow. The whole ground becomes a relief sculpture. It's beautiful, and again, that beauty annoys you, because the volcano doesn't deserve to have good lighting. You take advantage of the clarity to go hunting. You follow deer tracks to a patch of green. You move slow, careful, using wind direction. You get close enough to see them. Thin, skittish, grazing cautiously. You don't rush the shot. You coordinate with another hunter. You manage to bring one down cleanly. You don't celebrate loudly. You respect the animal, and you respect the fact that sound travels. You process quickly. You keep ash off the meat as best you can. You carry it back wrapped tight. Food returns to the centre of life, and with it, a little more stability. Mainstream fact. Hunting and butchery leave distinct tool marks and bone patterns. In ash-preserved contexts, those traces can be sealed and studied. You're doing a thing that future minds could decode. Again, you don't know that. You just know dinner is possible. As you work, you notice how ash interacts with your tools. It dulls edges faster, so you sharpen more often. It gets into joints of wooden handles, so you clean them. It forces more maintenance, which creates more flakes. Yissas, which creates more trace. The ash is turning your daily life into a thicker archaeological signature. Quirky tidbit. Some people much later used volcanic ash in construction, as a pozzolan, mixed with lime to make strong concrete. Romans famously used volcanic materials in building. You're nowhere near that, but you do notice that wet ash compacts into a firm surface when tamped. You use it to level a small area near the shelter, making it less muddy. It dries into a crust. Primitive flooring. The volcano gave you a building material, whether you asked or not. Joke 3. You're annoyed to admit it, but the volcano is kind of a generous interior designer. Here, have free flooring. It's grey. Everything is grey. That night, as you eat and talk, you start hearing the stories change. Early on, stories were pure fear. The sky fell. The mountain roared. You ran. Now stories include details. The deer tracks in ash, the gas hollow, the charcoal filter, the rock shelter that breathed. The narrative is becoming a manual. The ash isn't just a disaster. It's the medium that taught you. Historians still argue whether cultural memory of disasters becomes more practical over generations, retaining useful survival lessons, or more symbolic, turning into myths and taboos that obscure the original events. Watching your people talk, you can see both threads already twisting together. You lie down on the levelled ash crust, hides on top, the low fire banked. Outside, the ash layer glows faintly under starlight. It's like the world is powdered with moon dust, and you realise, with a tired, calm exhale, if you survive long enough, this ash will become just another layer in the ground. It will be dirt someday. It will feed plants. It will hide your footprints. But right now, it's holding your story still, so you can read it, and so can anything else that follows you. You wake to a morning that finally looks like it belongs to Earth again. Not perfectly. There's still a haze, still that faint dusty aftertaste, but the light has edges, shadows exist. The sky isn't a lid, it's a ceiling with space in it. And that's when you realise the biggest change wasn't only outside you, it happened inside you, quietly, while you were busy not dying. You stand, stretch, and feel your body protest less than it used to. Your lungs still scrape a little, but the scrape is tolerable, like a thorn you've stopped obsessing over. Your eyes aren't as red, your skin isn't as tight, you're still coated in the memory of ash. But you're no longer living in the middle of it, you're living after it, and now the lesson becomes, what do you carry forward? Because the eruption didn't just knock down trees and muddy streams, it rewired your habits. You don't drink water without looking at it first. You don't sleep in hollows where air can go dead. You don't build a roof you can't escape from. You don't treat a clear morning like a promise. You treat it like a test. Mainstream fact tucked into your new caution. Major volcanic eruptions can have longer-term regional and even global climate impacts, especially through ash and sulfate aerosols that can cool temperatures and alter rainfall patterns for months or years. You don't know the chemistry, but you can feel the pattern beginning. Cooler days, weird light, unpredictable seasons. The land you return to may not behave the way it did before. This is how disasters echo, not as one dramatic day, but as a changed baseline. So you start making decisions that assume the world is going to be weird for a while. You and the scarred hunter-scout father, wide loops now, not desperate sprints. You find patches where green is returning fastest, places with thinner ash, good drainage, steady wind. You also find places that look fine but aren't, channels that could surge with the next rain, slopes that are unstable under the new ash crust, hollows that still smell faintly sour. You mark them. You teach the kids the signs. You point, you repeat, you make it boring on purpose, because boring is how knowledge sticks. Historians still argue whether big environmental shocks like eruptions acted as evolutionary filters that favoured groups with better cooperation, mobility, and information sharing, or whether the outcomes were mostly shaped by chance, who happened to be upwind, who happened to have a cave, who happened to follow the deer at the right moment. You can feel both truths in your bones. Your cleverness mattered, your luck mattered too. The mountain isn't fair, but it is consistent in one way. It rewards attention. You begin to notice the tribe's social shape changing. After the trade encounter, there are now routes, paths between groups that weren't as obvious before. People talk about exchanging again, not just as a one-time emergency, but as a new normal. Someone suggests meeting at a certain ridge every few days to share news, where water is clean, where animals are moving, where the air feels wrong. You don't call it a network. It becomes one anyway. Joke 1. You realise you've basically invented community bulletin boards, except the bulletin board is a pile of rocks and the posts are mostly "don't go in that gully." With time, the tribe faces a quiet fork: settle or keep drifting. The land closer to the mountain will probably become rich later. Ash can turn into fertile soil. But later is not a place you can sleep tonight. Safer land farther out might be less productive, but it's stable. You weigh the pull of familiar territory against the push of new safety. You decide on a compromise because humans love compromises when the universe refuses to hand out guarantees. You establish a seasonal rhythm. You'll stay in the safer zone now, where the air is cleaner and the water is more reliable. You'll send occasional scouting parties closer later, when the rains have settled the ash and the danger pockets are mapped. You'll return only when returning doesn't require holding your breath. Quirky tidbit time. There's a strange, almost poetic thing about volcanic landscapes. Over time, They can become some of the most productive places for plants, and later human society is often clustered around volcanoes despite the risk, because the soils could be rich and water sources abundant. It's like the mountain offers a long-term apology written in crops. You don't farm yet, but you do notice that certain plants rebound fast and certain animals follow them. The idea creeps in, the mountain is deadly, but it's also a maker of new ground. You also begin codifying your eruption kit, even if you never call it that. Face coverings are stored in a dry bundle, always ready. The charcoal filter pouch becomes a permanent object, not a crisis invention. Everyone learns how to bank embers and carry them safely. Water-settling bowls are kept clean and set aside, not tossed randomly. You keep food wrapped tighter, hung higher. You stop treating these behaviours as temporary, you treat them as culture. Joke 2. You realise your tribe has developed a new hobby, emergency preparedness, and somehow you're the guy everyone asks for tips, which is deeply unfair because you still feel like you're winging it. As days pass, you hear laughter that isn't forced. Kids chase each other again, stopping only when someone reminds them not to kick up dust near the water. Elders argue about normal things. Someone complains about a blister in the same tone they once complained about cold soup. That's the sign you're truly moving forward. Complaint returns to its usual size. Still, you don't forget. You can't. Every time the wind shifts and carries a sour note, your body stiffens automatically. Every time the ground trembles, maybe just a distant quake, you glance toward the mountain like it's an old enemy you don't trust to stay retired. Historians still argue whether the memory of disasters fades quickly in oral cultures because daily survival pressures overwrite the past, or whether rare cataclysms become sticky memories, encoded in taboo, ritual and story precisely because they're rare and high stakes. Watching your people, you can see how it happens. The eruption becomes a story with rules attached. Don't sleep low, follow animals sideways, keep masks ready, treat water like a suspicious stranger. The story gets told at night. It becomes smoother, funnier, sharper. It becomes a teaching tool. It becomes identity. Joke 3. You can already hear future kids groaning, "Ugh, not the volcano story again," while secretly memorizing every detail. And then, one evening, the sky gives you a final gift, a proper sunset. Not a smeared, bruised glow, but a band of warm colour under the fading haze. The light touches the ash layer on the ground and makes it shimmer like tiny shells. You stand and watch with the tribe, quiet, because sometimes awe is the only reasonable response. You think about all the little choices that added up. Damp cloth over mouth, clay on skin, avoiding gullies, settling water, banking coals, trading stone for fish, stacking stones to mark danger, keeping kids close, rotating watch, refusing to panic. None of it looks heroic on its own. Together, it's survival. You return to the shelter, new now, improved, levelled, cleaner than the first desperate rock lip. You bank the fire, you drink water that no longer tastes like punishment, you lie down on hides that are finally dry, and you let your breathing slow. Now, the pacing softens. The night feels less like an enemy and more like a blanket you can trust. The wind outside is gentle, no longer carrying that constant bite of ash. You listen to it move through branches the way you listen to a fan hum in a quiet room, steady, boring, soothing. The tribe's breathing around you becomes a soft chorus. Someone sighs in their sleep. Someone murmurs a half-formed word and settles again. You picture the mountain far away, dark against the dim sky. It's still there. It will always be there. But tonight it feels smaller, less immediate, like a distant thought instead of a fist at your throat. You imagine plants pushing up through the ash layer, green spears insisting on life. You imagine animals returning, cautious at first, then bolder. You imagine your own footprints disappearing as rain and wind smooth the ground, and you feel oddly comforted by that, by the idea that the world can heal, can erase sharp edges, can move on. Your body relaxes in stages. Jaw unclenches, shoulders drop, hands loosen. You let the warmth from the banked coals seep into your back. You let your eyelids grow heavy. You remind yourself, quietly, kindly, that you did enough. You don't have to solve tomorrow tonight. Tomorrow can be its own small set of choices. Tonight is just breath, and dark, and the gentle proof that you're still here. And as you drift, your mind returns to one last simple truth. The ash fell, the sky dimmed, the mountain roared, and you learned. You adjusted. You carried your people sideways into safer air. You built routines out of chaos. You turned fear into information, and information into habit, and habit into something like peace. Your breathing slows further, each exhale longer than the last, as if you're letting the last of the grey dust slide out of your chest and dissolve into the night. The fire's glow is low and steady. The world outside is quiet. Inside the shelter, everything is soft, voices gone, movement stilled. Only the calm weight of rest settling over you like a clean hide.